Have you ever heard a soul break? Not in the poetic sense, not a metaphor dressed in pretty words. I mean the actual physical sensation of something sacred inside you snapping like a frozen branch under a heavy boot. The sound it makes is not loud. It is quiet, almost gentle. And that is what makes it devastating. Picture a girl, 28 years old, standing in the center of a ballroom filled with every person she has ever known. Her dress is secondhand. Her shoes are scuffed. Her hands are trembling around a glass of champagne that went warm 20 minutes ago because she was too nervous to drink it. Now picture the man standing 3 feet in front of her, the man the moon goddess chose as her other half, her fated mate. The one person in this entire world who was designed, crafted, destined to love her. He is laughing, not with her, at her. And the worst part, she is not surprised. Some part of her always knew this was how the story would go. The invisible girl does not get the fairy tale. She gets the punchline. But here is what she did not know. What nobody in that glittering, champagne-soaked room knew. Someone was watching from the shadows. Someone ancient. Someone terrifying. Someone whose violet eyes had never once looked at another living creature the way they were looking at her right now. And he was not laughing. He was deciding who would bleed. This is the story of how Seraphine Hart lost a beta and found a king. 3 hours earlier. The kitchens of the Silver Creek Pack House smelled like roasted garlic and anxiety. Seraphine Hart stood at the industrial sink, her hands submerged in water so hot it had turned her skin pink, scrubbing the remnants of beef Wellington from a silver serving tray that cost more than everything she owned combined. Around her, the kitchen staff moved in organized chaos. Platters of canapes were assembled with surgical precision. Wine bottles were uncorked and left to breathe on marble countertops. Somewhere in the distance, a string quartet was warming up, their notes drifting through the servant corridors like perfume from another world. The Winter Solstice Gala, the most important night of the year for the Silver Creek Pack. A night of politics, alliances, and if one was fortunate enough, the discovery of a fated mate. Seraphine had attended every gala since she was old enough to carry a tray. Never as a guest, always as the girl who refilled the water glasses and mopped the spills and disappeared before anyone important noticed she existed. She was good at disappearing. 22 years of practice will do that. Her parents had died when she was 6. A rogue attack on the eastern border. That is what they told her. That is what everyone told her. Arthur and Elise Hart killed in the line of duty, leaving behind a daughter with no status, no inheritance, and no one to ask questions on her behalf. The pack took her in. That was the generous way to describe it. The accurate way was that Alpha Miller signed a guardianship form, assigned her a cot in the laundry room, and put her to work the moment she could reach the kitchen counter on a step stool. She was not abused. She wanted to be clear about that. No one hit her. No one starved her. They simply forgot she was alive. She existed in the margins. The girl who scrubbed the pots. The girl who mended the uniforms. The girl who took her iron supplement every morning before breakfast because Dr. Hargrove said she was anemic and would get sick without it. 16 years of iron pills. Every single morning since she was 12. She never missed a dose. She did not know yet what those pills really were. But she would. Before the night was over, everything she believed about herself would shatter like crystal on a marble floor. Tonight, though, she was just Seraphine. Sarah, to the few people who bothered to speak to her. And tonight, for reasons she could not explain, something felt different. There was a hum in her blood, a restlessness in her bones. Her wolf, usually so quiet that Seraphine sometimes wondered if it was even there, was stirring, pacing, whimpering. "Something is coming," the wolf whispered. "Something ours." Seraphine dried her hands on her apron and glanced at the clock. 2 hours until the gala officially began. She had just enough time to shower, change, and slip into the ballroom to serve champagne. She did not know she was getting ready for the last night of her old life. The dress was navy blue, second-hand. She had found it in the donation bin 3 weeks ago and spent every free evening altering it to fit her frame. She was not tall, not short, not thin, not heavy. She was the kind of woman people's eyes slid right over. Pleasant enough. Forgettable. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror of the laundry room she called home. The dress was not designer. The heels were scuffed at the toes. Her dark hair fell in waves she had tried to tame with borrowed hairpins. But her eyes. There was something in her eyes tonight. A brightness she did not recognize. Almost silver at the edges, though that had to be the fluorescent lighting. "You are beautiful," her wolf said. Seraphine almost laughed. Wolves were loyal creatures, even the ones that had been drugged into a coma for a decade. The ballroom had been transformed. White silk drapes hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls. Thousands of fairy lights turned the space into a constellation. The gymnasium that usually smelled of sweat and floor wax now smelled of pine garlands and expensive cologne and the electric undercurrent of too many wolves in one room. Seraphine wove through the crowd carrying a tray of champagne flutes. She knew the rules. Eyes down. Move fast. Be invisible. Tonight, though, her wolf would not settle. It clawed at the inside of her chest like a caged animal sensing a storm. Then the doors opened. Cormac Aldridge walked into the gala like a man who had already been crowned. He was the beta's son, 30 years old. Sandy blonde hair that looked perfectly disheveled. Shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the pack's security. A jawline that belonged on a magazine cover, and a smile that had systematically broken every heart in their graduating class. He was arrogance and charm poured into a tailored tuxedo. Every girl in the room turned to look. Seraphine told herself she would not. Her wolf had other plans. The moment Cormac crossed the threshold, it hit her. A scent so overwhelming she nearly dropped the tray. Rain on warm cedar, fresh-cut grass, something wild and electric that made every nerve ending in her body ignite simultaneously. Mate? The word exploded through her mind like a thunderclap. Her wolf threw itself against her ribcage, howling. "Mate, mate, he is here. He is ours." No, this could not be right. The moon goddess did not pair kitchen servants with future pack betas. That was not how the world worked. Not her world, anyway. But the pull. Oh, the pull. It was a hook buried in her navel, dragging her forward against her will. The champagne tray trembled in her hands. She set it down on the nearest table before she shattered every glass on it. Across the ballroom, Cormac had gone rigid. His nostrils flared. His head snapped up, scanning the crowd with the focus of a predator catching a scent. Their eyes locked. The room tilted. Every sound faded. The string quartet. The clink of glasses. The murmur of 200 conversations. All of it dissolved into white noise until there was nothing left but the two of them and the invisible thread pulling them together. She saw recognition bloom in his eyes. Shock, confusion, and for one beautiful delusional heartbeat, she thought she saw joy. He started walking toward her. The crowd parted for him naturally, sensing the intent of a man on a mission. Seraphine's hands shook so violently she had to press them flat against her thighs. He is coming. Her wolf was delirious. He is coming for us. Cormac stopped 3 feet away. Up close, the scent was suffocating. Her knees buckled. She locked them, refusing to fall. Sarah. His voice was flat, not warm, not cold, just flat, like a doctor reading test results. I feel it too, she whispered. Her voice cracked, and she hated herself for it. Silence. Heavy, loaded silence. People were watching now. The Beta Air and the Kitchen Omega. It was the scandal of the century. Cormac looked her up and down. His gaze traveled from her altered navy dress to her scuffed heels to her borrowed hairpins. It was not the gaze of a man admiring his mate. It was the gaze of a man appraising livestock and finding it lacking. Then he smirked. You feel it? He asked, loud enough for the nearby circle of guests to hear. Yes. Hope bloomed in her chest. Foolish, fragile, persistent hope. Cormac threw his head back and laughed. It was not a joyful sound. It was sharp and cruel and incredulous, and it echoed off the silk-draped walls like a gunshot. He turned to his friends, Mason and Fletcher, who were already snickering behind their whiskey glasses. Can you believe this? Cormac wheezed, wiping a theatrical tear from his eye. The moon goddess has a sense of humor. A twisted one, but a sense of humor. The hope in her chest did not just wither, it was ripped out by the roots. Cormac, she breathed. He turned back. The smile vanished. What replaced it was worse. Disgust. Pure, undiluted disgust, as if he had stepped in something foul and was deciding whether to scrape it off or burn the shoe. You thought? He chuckled again, shaking his head slowly. You actually thought I would accept you? Seraphine Hart. The girl who scrubs my father's floorboards. The music stopped. She did not know when, but it had. The string quartet's bows hung suspended over silent strings. Every head in the ballroom had turned. Alpha Miller, the elders, the visiting dignitaries from neighboring packs, 200 pairs of eyes watching the Omega get her heart carved out in real time. But we are mates, she whispered. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she would not let them fall. Not yet. It is the bond. The goddess chose us. The bond is a suggestion, Seraphine, Cormac spat, not a law. He took a step closer, letting his beta aura roll over her like a wave of hot lead. Her Omega instinct screamed at her to submit, to bow, to bare her neck and accept whatever scraps he chose to throw. She did not bow. She stood there, shaking, but standing. I, Cormac Aldridge, future beta of the Silver Creek Pack, he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent hall, reject you, Seraphine Hart, as my mate. The pain was instantaneous. It felt like a fist punching through her sternum and ripping out whatever lived behind her ribs. The bond, so bright and new and full of impossible promise, snapped. She gasped. Her knees finally gave out and she stumbled, catching herself on the dessert table as champagne glasses rattled. But Cormac was not finished. He reached for Margot Sinclair, the Gamma's daughter, who was standing 3 feet away in a dress that cost more than Seraphine's entire lifetime of earnings. Margot was tall, blonde, beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful. She had the decency to look uncomfortable for half a second before Cormac pulled her against his side. This, Cormac said, his arm around Margot's waist, is what a beta's mate looks like. And then he kissed her, right there, in front of Seraphine, in front of everyone, while the bond in her chest was still bleeding, still screaming, still dying. He pressed his mouth to another woman's lips and held it there long enough to make sure the message was received. When he pulled back, he looked down at Seraphine. She was still gripping the table, still standing, barely. Go clean something, Sarah, he said, It is the only thing you are good for." The laughter started. It began with Mason and Fletcher. Then it spread. Not everyone. Some of the elders shifted uncomfortably. A few of the visiting wolves looked away, but enough people laughed, enough to fill the ballroom with the sound of an Omega being reminded of her place. Seraphine let go of the table. She straightened her spine. She looked at Cormac one last time. There were no tears on her face. They were there, burning behind her eyes like acid, but she would not give him the satisfaction. Then she turned and walked toward the garden doors. She did not run. She walked, head up, shoulders back, each step costing her more than anyone in that room would ever understand. She pushed through the glass doors, and the winter air hit her like a wall of ice. She kept walking, past the rose garden, past the frozen fountain, into the snow-covered tree line where the pine forest swallowed the light from the ballroom and the laughter finally, mercifully, faded. She collapsed against an oak tree. Her legs gave out and she slid down the frozen bark until she was sitting in the snow. And only then, only when she was certain no one could see or hear, did she let the tears come. They came like a flood, silent and scorching, carving hot trails down her frozen cheeks. The rejection pain pulsed in her chest in waves, synchronized with her heartbeat, each beat a reminder. Unwanted, unworthy, a joke. She did not know how long she sat there. Minutes, maybe an hour. The gala continued inside. She could hear the muffled bass of the music, the clinking of glasses. The world had not stopped just because hers had ended. It is a poor trait for a wolf to show her belly to the enemy. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, low, rough. It vibrated through the frozen earth beneath her like a seismic tremor. Seraphine scrambled to her feet, wiping her face with the backs of her hands. She scanned the darkness. A man stepped from the shadows between the pines. Her first thought was that he was enormous, significantly taller than Cormac, with a build that made him look carved from the mountain itself. He wore a black suit that strained against the muscles of his arms and thighs. No coat, despite the freezing temperature, as if the cold was beneath his notice, but it was his face that stopped her breath. Dark hair, black as a raven's wing, swept back from features that were brutally, almost painfully handsome. High cheekbones, a jaw shadowed with stubble, a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. And his eyes. His eyes were dark, almost black, but there were flecks in them. Violet, swirling like molten amethyst. "Who are you?" she stammered. Her wolf reacted in a way that made no sense. With Cormac, her Omega instincts had told her to submit. With this man, they told her to run. Not because he was dangerous, although every cell in her body confirmed that he was the most dangerous thing she had ever encountered, but because something deeper than instinct, something ancient and unnamed, was pulling her toward him so hard it hurt. He walked closer, silent, fluid, a predator who had no need to announce himself because everything in the forest already knew he was there. He stopped 2 feet away. His scent hit her. Dark chocolate, tobacco leaf, something metallic, like blood and ozone and the air before a lightning strike. "You ran," he said, not a question. "I could not stay." Because a boy laughed. She flinched. He is not just a boy. He is the future Beta. And he rejected me. The stranger tilted his head. "I saw." "You were there?" "I am always where I need to be." He reached toward her face. She flinched, expecting something she could not name. He paused. His eyes narrowed slightly, registering her reaction, cataloging it, filing it away in whatever ruthless calculus operated behind those violet-flecked irises. Then he continued, slowly. His hand, massive and rough and scarred across the knuckles, brushed a strand of wet hair from her cheek. His skin was impossibly warm against her frozen face. The contact lasted maybe 2 seconds. It rearranged something fundamental inside her. "He broke the bond," the stranger said, "but he did not break you, little wolf, unless you let him." "I have nothing," she whispered. "I am an Omega. He is right. I am nothing." Something flashed in those eyes. The violet flecks swirled violently, like a storm gathering behind glass. Status is a lie told by weak men to make themselves feel powerful. His voice dropped half an octave. "True strength is not given by birthright. It is taken." He looked toward the ballroom. Light and laughter spilled from the windows like something obscene. "What is your name?" he asked. "Sarah. Seraphine Hart." "Seraphine?" He tested it, rolled it across his tongue like wine. "The fiery one. The burning one." He looked at her with an intensity that made her stomach drop. "Do you want them to stop laughing, Seraphine?" She blinked. "What?" "That boy humiliated you. He broke the most sacred law of our kind for the sake of his vanity. He made them laugh at you." A pause. "Do you want them to stop?" "I just want the pain to stop," she said honestly. "The pain stops when you rise above it." He extended his hand. Large, scarred, calloused. A hand that had ended lives and built empires, and was now being offered to a crying girl in the snow. "Come with me," he said. "Back inside?" Horror flooded her voice. "I cannot. They are all laughing. Let them laugh." His voice was soft, almost tender. It was terrifying. "They will not be laughing long. Walk with me, Seraphine, and I promise you, by the time the moon sets, no one will ever look down on you again." She stared at his hand. She did not know this man. He could be a rogue, a visiting noble, a ghost made of winter air and her own desperation. But the power radiating from him eclipsed everything she had ever felt. Alpha Miller's authority was a candle. This man was a forest fire. Her wolf stopped whimpering. For the first time in 22 years, it stood tall inside her mind. Trust him. Go with him. He is ours. Seraphine took a breath. She placed her shaking hand in his. His fingers closed around hers. A jolt of electricity shot up her arm, so intense it made her gasp. Not like the bond with Cormac, which had been warm and gentle and immediately shattered. This was a steel cable anchoring into her bones. This was a cathedral door slamming open. This was a heartbeat she did not know she had been missing until it synchronized with her own. He felt it too. She saw it in the way his jaw tightened. The way his breath caught for one unguarded fraction of a second before he locked it down behind walls of iron discipline. He tucked her hand into the crook of his arm. "Head up," he commanded gently. "Shoulders back. You are not a victim tonight. You were never a victim. You simply had not met me yet." "Who are you?" she asked for the third time as he led her back toward the ballroom doors. "Please." He did not look at her. He looked straight ahead, at the golden light beyond the glass, at the room full of wolves who had laughed at the woman on his arm. A slow, predatory grin curled across his mouth. "My name is Theron Blackwood." She stumbled, actually tripped over her own feet in the snow. Theron Blackwood. The Alpha King, the ruler of every pack on the continent, the man they called the Wolf of Death, the man who had not attended a minor pack gala in over a century. "You are the king," she breathed. "I am." "But why? Why are you here? Why are you helping me?" He stopped. They were standing just outside the garden doors now. Through the glass, she could see Cormac in the center of the room, holding court, Margot draped on his arm like an accessory. Laughing. Still laughing. Theron turned to her. He cupped her face in both hands. His palms were enormous and warm, and she felt, absurdly, like she was being held together by them. Like if he let go, she would fly apart. His eyes were glowing now. Full violet. Ancient and terrifying and unbearably beautiful. Because I have been searching for my mate for 100 years, Seraphine. And I finally found her crying in the snow. The word hit her like a physical blow. Mate, that boy rejected the gift of the moon goddess, Theron said, his voice fierce and low and shaking with something she would later recognize as barely contained rage. He threw away a diamond because he wanted a shiny pebble. His loss is my salvation. He leaned down. His forehead rested against hers. His breath was warm on her lips. She could feel his heartbeat through the points where their skin touched, steady, powerful, unshakable. I, Theron Blackwood, Alpha King of the Lycanthropy Council, accept you, Seraphine Hart, as my fated mate. The bond slammed into place. If the bond with Cormac had been a thread, this was a chain forged in starfire. It hit her with the force of something cosmic, something older than language, older than the moon herself. Power flooded her veins. Ancient, dark, intoxicating. Her wolf, that small, quiet, drugged creature that had barely whispered for 22 years, threw back its head and howled. The rejection pain evaporated, burned away in an instant, replaced by a heat so profound it rewrote her from the inside out. Her eyes flashed silver. Ready? Theron whispered. She looked through the glass at Cormac, at the boy who had laughed. He seemed so small now, so terribly, pathetically small. Yes, she said. Theron kicked the doors open. The sound of the double doors crashing against the walls silenced the room like a gunshot. The music died. Every head turned. They stood in the doorway, the Alpha King, radiating an aura so oppressive that wolves in the front row dropped to their knees involuntarily. And Seraphine, the kitchen girl. On his arm, Cormac froze mid-laugh. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked embalmed. His glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the polished floor. Theron walked forward, pulling Seraphine with him. The crowd parted. No one breathed. He stopped in the center of the room, 5 feet from Cormac. I was told this was a celebration of mates, Theron said. His voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried the weight of 2 centuries of absolute authority. Yet, when I arrived, I witnessed a display of such disrespect that I questioned whether this was a pack of wolves or a gathering of stray dogs. Alpha Miller rushed forward, nearly tripping over his own feet. Your Majesty, we had no idea you were attending. What an honor, what a privilege to... Theron ignored him. His eyes had not left Cormac. You, Theron said. Cormac swallowed. Your Majesty, I watched you reject your fated mate. I watched you laugh at her. I watched you call her weak. Theron paused. You wanted a warrior, a queen. Another pause, longer, colder. You would not recognize a queen if she ripped your throat out. He released Seraphine's arm. He stepped forward and ripped open the collar of his shirt, exposing the side of his neck. Then he turned to her. His eyes softened. For the first time since she had met him, the predator disappeared. What remained was just a man who had searched for 100 years, a man who was asking. Mark me, Seraphine. Gasps rippled through the room like a shockwave. Your Majesty, she whispered. Mark me, he said again, softer. Claim me. Let them see who you are. She stepped forward, rose on her tiptoes. She could feel Cormac watching. She could feel his disbelief radiating like heat from a fire. She pressed her lips to the pulse point of the Alpha King's neck. His skin burned against her mouth, her canines extended. She bit down. Theron roared, not in pain, in triumph. The sound shook the chandeliers. She tasted his blood, rich and ancient and electric with power, and something inside her shifted. His scent wove itself into hers. They became something new, something unbreakable. She pulled back. A complex, swirling mark seared itself into his neck. "My turn," Theron growled. He swept her hair aside, in front of Cormac, in front of Margot, in front of Alpha Miller and every person who had ever looked through Seraphine like she was made of glass. Theron Blackwood, the most powerful wolf alive, sank his teeth into the curve of her shoulder. The mark burned into her skin like a brand made of light. He licked the wound closed. She shivered. He turned them to face the room, his arm wrapped around her waist, possessive and protective and absolute. "Boo," Theron Blackwood commanded. "Bow to your queen." Silence. Then Alpha Miller's knees hit the floor. Then the elders. Then the guests, one by one, dropping like dominoes. Cormac stood frozen. His eyes were fixed on the mark on her neck. The royal crest of the Blackwood line, glowing silver against her skin. Theron's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow filled the entire room. "Bo." Cormac's knees cracked against the marble. He collapsed forward, hands flat on the ground, head bowed. His entire body trembled. Theron looked down at him, smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You wanted a queen," Theron said. "You had one. And now you will spend the rest of your life kneeling before her." He kissed Seraphine's temple. "Shall we go, my love? This place smells of regret." She looked at the top of Cormac's bowed head, at the man who had laughed, who was not laughing anymore. "Yes," she said, "let us go home." As they walked toward the doors, the crowd still on its knees, Seraphine heard a sound. Quiet, almost gentle. Cormac was crying. She did not look back. She did not need to. The adrenaline faded somewhere around the second hour of the drive. They were not in a car. They were in a convoy. 4 black SUVs flanked the armored sedan Seraphine sat in, their headlights cutting through the dark mountain roads like the eyes of wolves on the hunt. The leather seats were heated. The windows were tinted so dark the outside world looked like a film playing on mute. Everything smelled of cedarwood, air freshener, and gun oil and him. Theron sat beside her, his massive frame taking up more than his share of the back seat. The moment they had stepped into the vehicle, the man who had knelt the Silver Creek pack with a single word had shifted. Not physically, something subtler. The romantic savior retreated and the monarch took his place. He held her hand, his thumb drawing slow circles on her knuckles, but his attention was somewhere else entirely. "I do not care if it is a neutral zone," he said into his phone, his voice flat and surgical. "If rogue scent is found within 20 miles of the eastern border, burn it. Salt the earth. Do not call me again unless they cross the river." He hung up, turned to her. The hard lines of his face softened so quickly it was like watching stone become water. "Forgive me. The council never sleeps, and neither do problems." "Where are we going?" she asked. Her voice sounded strange in this vehicle. Too small. Too quiet. Like it belonged to someone who had not just been claimed by the most powerful wolf on the continent. "Ironwood," he said. "The royal estate. You're home now." "You're home." The words bounced around inside her skull like a marble in an empty room. Home. She had never had a home. She had a cot in a laundry room. She had a corner of a kitchen she was allowed to occupy between shifts. She had a life measured in dish soap and iron pills and the careful art of not being noticed. And now the Alpha King was telling her she had a home. She looked down at their joined hands. His was enormous, scarred across the knuckles, the ridges of old wounds catching the dim interior light. Her hand looked like a child's inside his grip, but the warmth radiating from him was real. The bond humming between them like a plucked string was real. The mark on her neck, already fading from raw red to a luminous silver, was real. She pressed her forehead against the cool window and watched the dark forest stream past. The trees grew taller the further north they drove, older. Their trunks were thick as houses, their branches interlocking overhead like the vaulted ceiling of a cathedral. This was ancient land. She could feel it in her bones, a low vibration that was almost musical, as if the earth itself was humming a song she had forgotten the words to. Ironwood revealed itself the way a predator reveals itself, slowly, then all at once. First the walls, 30 feet of gray stone rising from the mountainside like the bones of something prehistoric. Then the gates, black iron worked into patterns of wolves and thorns, swinging open silently as the convoy approached. Then the estate itself. It was not a house. It was a fortress that had been taught manners. Ancient stone married to walls of modern glass, the entire structure built into the mountain as if it had grown from the rock rather than been placed upon it. Towers rose at the corners, their peaks disappearing into low clouds. Warm light poured from hundreds of windows, and the grounds were immaculate. Manicured gardens dusted with snow, stone pathways lit by lanterns, a frozen lake in the distance reflecting the moon like a sheet of polished silver. Seraphine's breath left her in a rush. She pressed both hands to the window like a child staring into a toy shop. "This is where you live?" she whispered. Theron glanced at the estate the way one glances at a familiar coat. "This is where we live." The convoy pulled into a circular driveway wide enough to land a helicopter. As the vehicle stopped, Seraphine saw them through the windshield. People, hundreds of them, staff in pressed uniforms, guards in black tactical gear, dignitaries in suits and gowns, all of them standing in perfect formation, all of them waiting for her. Her stomach dropped to her scuffed heels. "I cannot go out there," she said, looking down at her wine-stained navy dress, her messy hair, her mascara that had been cried off hours ago. "Theron, look at me. I look like I have been dragged through a storm." He took her chin between his thumb and forefinger, gentle but firm. He turned her face until she had no choice but to look at him. "You look like a queen who has just survived a war," he said. "Let them see what survival looks like." The car door opened. Cold mountain air rushed in. Theron stepped out first, unfolding to his full, terrifying height. He extended his hand. She took it. The moment her scuffed heel touched the gravel, every person in those perfect rows dropped to one knee. The sound of it, hundreds of knees hitting stone in unison, was like a drumbeat, like a heartbeat. "Welcome home, Your Majesty," they said in chorus. Seraphine's eyes burned. She blinked rapidly. She would not cry. She was done crying. She had cried enough for one lifetime in that garden in Silver Creek, and she refused to spill another tear on a day that was supposed to mark the beginning of something new. But the overwhelm was suffocating. The grandeur, the deference, the sheer impossibility of standing here in this dress with this mark on her neck, being called a title that belonged to someone else, someone better, someone who had not been scrubbing pots 6 hours ago. A woman stepped forward from the line of staff, and Seraphine's tenuous grip on composure faltered. She was stunning. That was the first word. The kind of stunning that made other women instinctively straighten their posture and touch their hair. She was tall, willowy, with hair the color of blood oranges cascading over one shoulder and eyes that were the pale green of sea glass. Her suit was charcoal, tailored so precisely it might as well have been sewn directly onto her body. She moved with the kind of fluid confidence that comes from decades of knowing exactly how much space one is entitled to occupy. "Your Majesty," the woman said, bowing to Theron. Her voice was silk over steel. She did not look at Seraphine, not once, as if the queen on the king's arm was a smudge on the landscape too insignificant to acknowledge. "Seraphine," Theron said, and she noticed the slight tightening around his jaw, the barely perceptible drop in his vocal register. "This is Lady Lysandra Ashworth. She manages the household affairs and serves as my liaison to the Elder Council." Lysandra finally turned her pale green gaze to Seraphine. The woman's eyes performed a full inventory in approximately 2 seconds. The cheap fabric of the altered dress, the scuffed heels, the hair that had lost its battle with the winter wind 3 hours ago, the posture of a girl who had spent her entire life learning how to make herself small. "A pleasure," Lysandra said. Her mouth formed the shape of a smile. Nothing else participated. "We were surprised by the news," she continued, her tone suggesting that surprised was the diplomatic version of a much less polite word. "We have prepared the guest suite in the south wing." "The Queen's suite," Theron corrected. His voice dropped an octave. Seraphine was learning that when his voice dropped, someone was about to be either corrected or destroyed. "She sleeps in my wing, in my chambers." Lysandra's composure flickered. A hairline fracture in the porcelain, visible for half a heartbeat before it sealed itself shut. "Of course, sire, though given the suddenness of the union, protocol would suggest a vetting period. The council will want to review her lineage before—" "Protocol does not choose my mate, Lysandra. The goddess does." The words landed like stones thrown into still water. Lysandra bowed her head. When she raised it, the smile was back, wider this time, sharper. "As you wish, sire. I will see to her needs personally." Theron turned to Seraphine. He squeezed her hands, and something in his expression shifted. The king retreated again, and for a moment he was just the man from the garden, the one who had brushed the hair from her frozen cheek. "I must meet with the generals," he said. "The rejection at the gala caused a ripple in the bond energy of the region. Packs are restless. I need to stabilize the situation before dawn." "You are leaving?" She hated how small her voice sounded, hated more that she could not stop it. "For 1 hour, perhaps 2. He kissed her forehead. His lips lingered there, warm and firm, and she felt the bond pulse between them like a second heartbeat. "I will come to you. I promise." Then he strode away, flanked by guards, and within seconds, the night swallowed him whole. Seraphine stood in the driveway of the most magnificent structure she had ever seen, wearing a stained dress and broken shoes, and watched the only person she trusted in this new world disappear. "Follow me," Lysandra said behind her. She did not say, "Your Majesty." The interior of Ironwood was a museum with heating, marble floors, oil paintings and gilded frames, velvet runners so plush that Seraphine's ruined heels sank into them like footprints in fresh snow. Crystal chandeliers hung from ceilings painted with scenes from wolf mythology. The first pack, the moon goddess weeping silver tears, the great hunt that shaped the territorial lines. Lysandra walked 3 paces ahead, her heels clicking a precise rhythm on the stone. She did not slow down. She did not point things out. She walked the way a woman walks when she wants the person behind her to feel exactly how far they have to go to catch up. "So," Lysandra said, not turning around. "Silver Creek. A mid-tier pack, mostly agricultural. You worked in administration, I assume? Something clerical? The kitchens, Seraphine said softly. Lysandra stopped walking. She turned around slowly. Her sea-glass eyes traveled over Seraphine one more time, but this assessment was different from the first. The first had been clinical. This one was predatory. I was an Omega, Seraphine said, lifting her chin. She remembered Theron's command. Head up, shoulders back. I worked in the kitchens. Lysandra let out a breath that might have been a laugh in another life. And the king has brought a dishwasher to the ironwood throne. I am his mate, Seraphine said. She channeled every scrap of bravery she had left, which was not much. That is all that matters. Lysandra stepped closer. Her perfume was expensive. Something with jasmine and amber and an undertone of something cold. Calculated. Like even her scent was curated to intimidate. Theron is a man of instinct, she said, her voice dropping to a register meant for confidences, for secrets shared between women. He acts on impulse. He sees something broken and he wants to fix it. It is his most endearing quality and his most dangerous flaw. She paused. Let the words settle. But ruling, darling, ruling requires breeding, education, pedigree, strategic alliances that have been cultivated over centuries. Her eyes held Seraphine's without blinking. You may warm his bed tonight. You may even wear his mark. But marks fade, and when the novelty of his rescue project wears off, and it will wear off, the council will require a queen who can actually govern. She spun on her heel. Your chambers are at the end of the hall. The servants will draw you a bath and find something appropriate for you to wear. I suggest you enjoy the luxury while it lasts. She walked away. Her heels clicked their precise rhythm down the corridor and around a corner. And then she was gone. Seraphine stood alone in a hallway that was longer than the entire Silver Creek pack house. Placeholder. The word embedded itself under her skin like a splinter. She entered the master suite. It was obscene in its beauty. A wall of floor-to-ceiling glass overlooked a mountain range, still wearing its crown of snow. The bed was enormous, draped in charcoal silk and silver furs. A fireplace tall enough to stand in crackled with a fire that someone had lit in anticipation of her arrival. Fresh flowers, white roses, and winter jasmine sat in crystal vases on every surface. She walked to the mirror. The woman who looked back was a stranger. Tear tracks on her cheeks. Mascara smudged beneath her eyes. A second-hand dress that had been through a war. And there, on the curve of her shoulder, glowing faintly silver against her skin, the mark of the Alpha King. She touched it. Warmth radiated from it, pulsing gently in time with her heartbeat. Was Lysandra right? Was she a novelty? A stray dog the king had picked up out of pity because she had been crying in the snow at the right time? Seraphine sank to the floor. She pulled her knees to her chest. The marble was cold through her dress. She was the Alpha King's mate. She was sitting in a palace that could house 1,000 people. She was wearing a mark that made entire packs bow. And she had never felt more alone. Theron did not return in 1 hour or 2. When Seraphine woke the next morning, the other side of the bed was cold, untouched, a note on the pillow in handwriting that was surprisingly elegant for a man with hands that size. Council emergency, border skirmish near the northern pass. I will return by evening. Forgive me. T. She read it 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and tucked it into the pocket of the silk robe someone had laid across the foot of the bed while she slept. Day 1 in her new life. And she was already alone. She ate breakfast in the chambers because she was too intimidated to find the dining hall. A servant brought it on a silver tray: eggs, toast, fruit, coffee in a porcelain cup so thin she could see light through it. The servant called her Your Majesty and would not make eye contact, which made the loneliness worse. By midday, the silence was unbearable. Seraphine did what she had always done when the world became too large and she became too small. She went looking for stories. The Ironwood Library occupied an entire wing of the palace. 3 stories of books, floor to ceiling, connected by spiral staircases of wrought iron. The collection spanned centuries. Leather-bound volumes of pack law sat beside modern texts on diplomacy. Medical journals shared shelves with mythology. The air smelled of old paper and beeswax, and the particular kind of dust that accumulates only in rooms where knowledge has been sitting undisturbed for a very long time. She spent hours there, reading pack history, council protocols, etiquette manuals that made her head spin. If she was going to be a queen, even a temporary one, even a placeholder, she would not be an ignorant one. But it was not the official texts that drew her deeper into the library. It was the door. She found it on the 2nd floor, tucked behind a shelf of forgotten almanacs. A wooden door, older than anything else in the palace, with no handle. Just a lock. A lock that was not locked. Seraphine pushed it open. The room beyond was small, intimate. The walls were not marble or glass. They were plain stone, rough and unfinished, as if this space predated the rest of the palace by centuries. A single window let in a column of afternoon light. And the paintings. They were everywhere. On easels propped against walls, stacked 3 deep. Dozens of them, perhaps more. All of the same woman. She was dark-haired and dark-eyed, with skin the color of warm bronze and a smile that made Seraphine's chest hurt. In some paintings, she was laughing, her head thrown back. In others, she was sleeping, one hand curled beneath her cheek. In one, she stood in a field of wildflowers with her arms extended, her face turned toward a sun that the painter had rendered with such desperate tenderness that Seraphine could feel the warmth coming off the canvas. In every painting, the woman was luminous, not beautiful in the way Lysandra was beautiful, which was architectural and precise. Beautiful in the way that a bonfire is beautiful. Warm and wild and impossible to look away from. And in every painting, she was loved. You could see it in the brushstrokes, in the way the painter lingered on the curve of her cheek, the line of her throat, the exact way her hair fell across her shoulder. Whoever painted these was not an artist. He was a man drowning, and this woman was the only heir. Seraphine did not hear him enter. Her name was Elowen. She spun around. Theron stood in the doorway. He was still in his suit from the night before, though the jacket was gone and the sleeves of his shirt were rolled to his elbows. He looked exhausted, dark circles beneath his eyes, a tension in his jaw that had not been there last night, but his gaze was fixed on the paintings, not on her. And in his expression, she saw something she recognized. Loss. The kind that does not diminish with time. The kind that simply becomes a room in your house that you learn to walk past without opening the door. Except someone had opened the door. "I should not be in here," Seraphine said quickly. "I did not realize. The door was open and It is fine." He walked past her, stopped in front of the largest painting, the one of the woman in the wildflowers. He looked at it the way a man looks at a wound he has stopped trying to bandage. "She was my mate," he said. "My first mate, 107 years ago." The silence that followed was so heavy, Seraphine could hear the fire crackling 3 rooms away. "What happened to her?" she asked. She was not sure she had the right to ask, but something in his posture, the way his shoulders had dropped their rigid military line, the way his hands hung open at his sides instead of clenched into fists, told her that he needed someone to ask. "There is a curse on my bloodline," Theron said. He did not turn from the painting. "Placed by a witch named Morwen 3 centuries ago, after my great-grandfather executed her brother for practicing dark magic within Pack territory. She cursed the Blackwood line. Any mate claimed by a Blackwood alpha would wither within a year. The bond would turn toxic. Their life force would drain into ours, feeding our power while killing them." He turned to face her. The violet in his eyes was dim now, almost human. "Elowen lasted 11 months, he said. She started fading by the 3rd. She lost weight, stopped sleeping. The light went out of her eyes 1 candle at a time. I watched it happen, and I could not stop it." He paused, swallowed. "By the end, she could not stand. She could not eat. She could not remember my name. But she still smiled when I entered the room. She still reached for my hand." His voice fractured on the last word. He cleared his throat and reassembled it. "She died on a Tuesday morning. It was raining. I remember thinking that was wrong, that the sun should have been shining, that the sky should have had the decency to mourn." Seraphine's eyes were burning. "After Elowen, I spent decades searching for a cure. I consulted every witch, every healer, every ancient text on the continent. Nothing worked. I was told the curse was unbreakable, that I was destined to either live alone forever or claim another mate and watch her die the same way." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and in his eyes she saw it, not desire, not the possessive fire of the Alpha King. Something quieter, something terrified. "When I felt the bond with you in that ballroom, Seraphine," he said, "I did not feel joy. I felt fear, because claiming you might mean killing you." The air between them changed. The bond pulsed. She felt his pain through it, a dull, ancient ache that had been his companion for longer than she had been alive. "Then why did you claim me?" she whispered. He was quiet for a long time. "Because when I saw that boy laugh at you, when I saw him break you and walk away like you were nothing, something inside me chose. Before I could think, before I could calculate the risk, my wolf chose you, and I chose to trust my wolf over my fear." A pause. "I do not know if that was brave or selfish. I may never know. She should have been angry, should have been terrified. This man had bound her to a curse that had killed the woman in these paintings. But standing in that small stone room, surrounded by 100 portraits of a love that had been ripped away, she could not find anger. She could only find understanding. "I will not fade," she said. He flinched, like the words were a blade he had not seen coming. "You do not know that." "No," she agreed. "But I have spent 22 years being told what I am and what I am not. I am tired of other people deciding my fate." The ghost of something flickered across his mouth, not quite a smile, but close. The next day, he was present. Whatever the council needed from him, he made them wait. He appeared at breakfast. He sat across from her at the long dining table that could seat 50, but held only 2. And he asked her about the books she had been reading. He listened, not the way powerful people listen, with half their attention and a quarter of their patience. He listened the way a man listens when the voice across from him is the only sound in the world that makes sense. After breakfast, he took her to the stables. Ironwood kept 24 horses, massive beasts bred for mountain terrain with coats like polished obsidian and eyes that gleamed with almost lupine intelligence. Seraphine had never been on a horse. She had barely been outside the Silver Creek compound. The closest she had come to riding anything was balancing a tray of 16 champagne glasses up a spiral staircase. Theron selected a mare for her, midnight black with a white star on her forehead. The horse nuzzled Seraphine's palm and breathed warm air onto her wrist, and Seraphine felt something crack open in her chest. "Her name is Vesper," Theron said. "She has thrown 3 of my generals. She seems to like you." "I do not know how to ride," Seraphine admitted. "I know." He helped her into the saddle. His hands circled her waist and lifted her as if she weighed nothing. The contact lasted perhaps 4 seconds. 4 seconds of his palms against her ribs, the heat of him bleeding through the thin fabric of her borrowed riding coat. When she was seated, he adjusted the stirrups. His hand brushed her ankle. She felt the touch travel up her leg, through her hip, into the base of her spine. He looked up at her, and his hand was shaking. This man, who had crushed a glass to dust while watching a beta humiliate her, whose voice could bring an entire room to its knees, whose name was whispered like a curse in territories across the continent. His hand trembled at the brush of her ankle. "You are safe," he said. She did not know if he was talking about the horse. They rode for 2 hours through the mountain paths behind the estate. He rode beside her, close enough that their knees almost touched, pointing out landmarks. The waterfall that froze solid every January and became a sculpture of blue ice. The ridge where his grandfather had fought the last great rogue war. The meadow where ironwood wolves gathered for the summer solstice, where the grass grew so thick and wild that it came up to your waist. He did not talk about the curse. He did not talk about Elowin or the council or the border skirmish that had kept him away the previous night. He talked about the land, about the wolves who lived on it, about the way the light changed on the mountains between autumn and winter, and how he had watched that change for 200 years, and still found it surprising. It was the most she had ever heard him speak, and between the words, in the spaces where he paused to watch a hawk circle overhead or to steady her horse on a steep descent, she glimpsed the man beneath the king. A man who was profoundly, catastrophically lonely. A man who had lived for 2 centuries in a palace designed for 2 and occupied by 1. A man who had stopped believing he would ever have someone to show the waterfall to. When they returned to the stables and he lifted her down from the saddle, his hands stayed on her waist for a beat longer than necessary. Their faces were close. She could see the violet flecks in his eyes, brighter now than they had been that morning. She could smell him. Dark chocolate and tobacco and the cold mountain air that clung to his hair. His gaze dropped to her mouth. She saw his jaw tighten. She saw the decision happen in real time, the want crashing against the wall of his self-control and the wall holding. Barely. "We should go inside," he said. His voice was rougher than usual. "Yes," she agreed. Neither of them moved. A door slammed somewhere in the stable, and they stepped apart. The moment shattered, like something made of spun glass. But Seraphine carried the warmth of his hands on her waist for the rest of the day, and when she caught Lysandra watching her from the second-floor window with those pale green eyes, she did not look away. She held the woman's gaze, head up, shoulders back. On the 3rd morning, Seraphine woke before dawn, with a decision burning in her chest. If she was going to be a queen, if she was going to survive the curse, if she was going to be anything more than the girl Lysandra and the council expected her to be, she needed to become strong. Not politically strong, not socially strong, physically strong. She needed her wolf. She had not shifted since she was 12. That first and only shift had been agonizing. A brief flash of gray fur and trembling legs that lasted maybe 45 seconds before she collapsed. After that, nothing. Dr. Hargrove had told her that some Omegas simply had weak wolves, that it was normal, that her iron pills would help. 16 years of iron pills. She was beginning to understand that nothing about those pills had been designed to help. The training grounds were located beneath the east wing of the palace, a massive indoor arena with sand floors, reinforced walls, and the faint, lingering scent of sweat and adrenaline. At 5 a.m, it was empty, or so she believed. Seraphine stood in the center of the arena. She closed her eyes. She reached inward, down into the dark place where her wolf lived, and called to her. "Come out, please. I need you." A stirring. Faint. Like something breathing at the bottom of a well. She pushed harder. "Shift. I need to shift." Pain lanced through her bones, not the cracking, reforming pain of transformation that she had read about. This was different. Dull. Sickening. Heavy. Like her skeleton was wrapped in chains she could not see. She dropped to her knees. Her muscles seized. Bile rose in her throat, and she vomited onto the sand, her body rejecting the attempt with a violence that terrified her. She tried again, pushed through the nausea, through the pain, through the screaming wrongness of it. Nothing. Her bones would not shift. Her wolf could not surface. It was like pushing against a wall made of lead. She collapsed forward onto her hands, gasping, sweat dripping from her forehead into the sand. Pathetic. The word fell from above, like a stone dropped from a height. Seraphine looked up. On the upper observation level, Lysandra stood at the railing, a cup of tea in her hand. Beside her, General Hawthorne, Theron's right hand, stood with his arms crossed. His face was concerned. Hers was triumphant. "An Omega who cannot even shift," Lysandra called down, her voice carrying easily through the arena's acoustics. "If an assassin comes for you in the night, what will you do? Scrub a plate at them." The words hit their target. Seraphine felt the tears coming and hated herself for it. Hated her body for failing her. Hated the pills she had swallowed every morning for 16 years. Hated the girl she saw in mirrors who was never, ever enough. The arena doors exploded inward. Theron crossed the sand in seconds, skidding to his knees beside her. He must have felt her distress through the bond. His hands were on her face before she could speak, tilting her head, checking for injuries, his eyes blazing with a fury that was not directed at her. "What happened?" he demanded. "I tried to shift," she choked out, gripping the front of his shirt with both fists. "It hurts. I cannot do it, Theron. I tried, and I cannot. I am broken." Something in his expression shattered. Not anger. Something worse. Grief. The grief of a man who recognized the word broken because he had lived inside it for 100 years. He looked up at the observation deck. His eyes found Lysandra. They flashed red. "Lysandra," he said. His voice was so calm, it was lethal. "Get Dr. Aldrich, now." 10 minutes later, Seraphine was in the medical wing. Dr. Aldrich was ancient, over 300 years old, with a face like crumpled parchment and hands that trembled until they touched a patient, at which point they became steady as surgical steel. He had been the Blackwood family physician for 6 generations. He had delivered Theron into the world. He had held Eloan's hand when she died. He drew blood. Multiple vials. He attached monitors. He ran scans she did not understand using equipment she had never seen. Through it all, Theron paced the room like a caged predator, his footsteps wearing a track in the stone floor. "Why can she not shift?" Theron demanded. "Is it trauma? Malnutrition? Is it the bond disruption from the rejection? Dr. Aldrich watched the blood analysis populate on his screen. He frowned, adjusted the settings, frowned deeper. "This is peculiar," the old wolf murmured. "Explain." "Her white blood cell count is perfectly normal. Her bone density is above average. Her muscle fiber composition is consistent with..." He trailed off, tapped the screen, enlarged a graph, stared at it for what felt like an hour but was probably 15 seconds. With what? Theron's voice was a blade. Dr. Aldrich turned his chair to face them both. His trembling hands were folded in his lap. His ancient eyes were very, very grave. "I found traces of aconite and silver nitrate in her bloodstream," he said. "Not a lethal dose, a microdose. And based on the accumulation in her hair follicles and bone marrow, I would estimate she has been ingesting it daily for at least 10 years. Possibly longer." The room went silent. Seraphine's hand flew to her mouth. "Wolf's Bane," Theron said. The two words left his mouth like bullets. "Administered consistently over a prolonged period," Dr. Aldrich confirmed. "Enough to suppress a wolf spirit entirely. Enough to force it into a chemical coma. Enough to make a powerful wolf appear to be a common omega for her entire adult life." "The pills," Seraphine whispered. Her voice sounded like it was coming from somewhere far away. "The iron supplements. Dr. Hargrove gave them to me when I was 12. After my first shift. He said I was anemic. He said I would get sick if I stopped taking them." Theron's fist hit the metal medical cart beside him. The steel crumpled like aluminum foil. Monitors rattled. A vial of blood toppled and shattered on the floor. "They were not treating anemia," Dr. Aldrich said, his voice quiet now. Almost gentle. The gentleness of a man delivering news that will change everything. "They were suppressing your true nature." "My true nature," she repeated. Dr. Aldrich looked at her. Then he looked at Theron. Then he looked back at her. "Your blood markers are not Omega, Your Majesty," he said. "They are not even Beta. Your genetic profile is consistent with a high-tier Alpha, possibly one of the highest I have ever recorded. Someone wanted to make absolutely certain you never developed your strength. They forced your wolf into a cage so deep, she forgot she existed." The room spun. Seraphine gripped the edge of the examination table until her knuckles turned white. She was not an Omega. She had never been an Omega. Everything she had been told about herself, every limitation, every inadequacy, every quiet moment of believing she was simply less than everyone around her, was a lie. A calculated, chemical, decade-long lie. "Why?" she asked. Her voice cracked. "Why would anyone do this to an orphan?" Theron was standing very still. The kind of still that comes before an earthquake. His eyes were no longer violet. They were red. Pure. Burning. Ancient red. "Because," he said, and his voice vibrated with a rage so profound the lights in the medical wing flickered. "You are not just an orphan, Seraphine." He walked to her, took her hands. His grip was impossibly gentle for a man whose aura was currently making the walls tremble. "I had my intelligence network investigate the Hart family records the moment I brought you to Ironwood," he said. "Your father was not a nobody. He was Arthur Hart, the former beta of the Northern Highland Pack, a pack with a direct bloodline to the original Wolf clans. He was exiled 23 years ago for challenging a corrupt alpha." He paused. Let it land. "You have royal blood in your veins, Seraphine. Ancient blood. If you had come into your full power, you would have been the strongest female alpha born in a generation. You could have challenged Alpha Miller for leadership. You could have overthrown the entire Silver Creek hierarchy. The realization settled over her like a shroud. They knew Alpha Miller, the Beta, Dr. Hargrove. They had known who she was from the day her parents died. Perhaps before. Perhaps her parents had not died in a random rogue attack at all. Perhaps they had been removed because they were threats. And their daughter, the girl with royal blood and a wolf powerful enough to tear their carefully constructed world apart, had been drugged into submission before she could ever discover what she was. They stole her wolf. They stole her life. They stole 22 years of knowing who she was. Something ignited in her chest. Not the bond this time. Something older. Something that was entirely, fundamentally hers. They poisoned me, she said. Her voice was not shaking anymore. For 10 years. Theron's eyes held hers. Red fading slowly back to violet. In them, she saw something she had not seen before. Not pity. Not the protective fury of the Alpha King. Pride. He was watching a queen wake up, and somewhere deep inside her, beneath the chains and the chemicals, and the 22 years of silence, a massive white wolf opened its eyes. It shook off the dust of a decade. It rose to its feet. It threw back its head. And in a voice that rattled every window in Ironwood Palace, it howled. The antidote was not a medicine. It was a war. Dr. Aldrich prepared it in a sealed chamber 2 floors beneath the medical wing, a room lined with wolfsbane-resistant alloys and ventilation systems designed to filter toxins at the molecular level. The antidote itself was a clear liquid with a faint silver shimmer, no larger than a standard IV bag, and according to the 300-year-old physician, it would accomplish in 12 hours what should have taken months. The compound will bind to the aconite deposits in her bone marrow, muscle tissue, and neural pathways, Dr. Aldrich explained, his trembling hands steady as he inserted the IV line into Seraphine's arm. It will neutralize them and flush them from her system. Her wolf spirit, once freed from chemical suppression, will begin to reassert itself. And the pain? Theron asked. He stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, jaw locked. He had not left the medical wing since the diagnosis. The generals could wait. The council could wait. The border could burn. Dr. Aldrich hesitated. That hesitation said more than any words could. The pain will be considerable, he said carefully. Her body has been operating under chemical restraint for over a decade. Removing those restraints will force a rapid physiological transformation. Bone density will increase. Muscle fiber will restructure. Neural pathways that have been dormant since puberty will fire simultaneously. It will feel, forgive the bluntness, like being remade from the inside. I can handle pain, Seraphine said. Both men looked at her. She was sitting up in the hospital bed, still wearing the riding clothes from that morning, her hair pulled back, her face pale but set. She looked at Theron. I have been handling pain my entire life, she said. At least this pain leads somewhere. Theron held her gaze. Something passed between them through the bond. Not words, something older than language, an understanding. He nodded. Dr. Aldrich opened the IV valve. The first hour was manageable. A low-grade fever, aching joints. The sensation of warmth spreading through her bloodstream like ink dropped into water. She could feel it working, a chemical tide sweeping through her body and dissolving things that had no right to be there. Deposits of poison that had accumulated in her bones for a decade, breaking apart molecule by molecule. The second hour was worse. The fever spiked. Sweat soaked through her clothes and the sheets beneath her. Her bones began to ache, not the dull suppression ache she had felt in the training arena, but something sharper, more purposeful, growing pains. Her skeleton was remembering what it was supposed to be. By the third hour, she was screaming. The pain arrived like a freight train. Her spine arched off the bed. Her fingers clawed the sheets until the fabric tore. Every bone in her body felt like it was being broken and reset simultaneously, which, according to Dr. Aldrich's monitors, was more or less exactly what was happening. Her bone density was increasing in real time. Her muscle mass was restructuring. Dormant neural pathways were firing for the first time in 10 years, flooding her brain with sensory input it had never been designed to receive all at once. She screamed until her voice gave out. Then she just shook. Theron did not leave. He sat beside her bed for all 12 hours. He held her hand through the worst of it, letting her crush his fingers with a grip that would have shattered a normal man's bones. He wiped the sweat from her forehead with a cloth he refreshed every 20 minutes. When the pain crested and she thrashed so violently that she nearly fell from the bed, he climbed onto the mattress beside her and held her against his chest, his arms wrapped around her shaking body, his chin resting on the top of her head. He did not speak. He did not promise it would be over soon. He did not lie and say it would be all right. He simply held her and let his heartbeat be the metronome that kept her tethered to consciousness when everything else was chaos. At some point during the 7th hour, when the pain had plateaued into a constant grinding agony that made her teeth ache, she felt something wet on her hair. She was too delirious to process it immediately. A droplet, then another, warm. Theron was crying, not sobbing, not breaking down. Just silent tears tracking down the face of the most powerful wolf alive, falling into the hair of the woman he was holding together. "I thought I was going to lose you," he whispered. His voice was wrecked, stripped of authority, stripped of command, stripped of everything that made him the Alpha King and reduced to the raw, terrified sound of a man who had already watched one mate die in his arms. The monitors. Your heart rate dropped to 32 beats per minute in the 5th hour. Aldrich said there was a chance the poison had been in your system so long that removing it could... He stopped, swallowed. I sat here and I watched the numbers drop, and I could not breathe, Seraphine. I am 200 years old, and I could not breathe. She reached up with a hand that felt like it was made of wet sand and touched his face. Her fingertips found the trail of moisture on his cheek. I am still here, she whispered. I know. I am not going anywhere. He pressed his face into her palm. She felt his jaw clench beneath her fingers, felt the tremor run through him, a full-body shudder that had nothing to do with cold and everything to do with the kind of fear that lives in the bones of a man who has loved and lost and is terrified of doing it again. The curse, she said. Her brain was foggy, but the thought had been circling since the room with the paintings. Tell me about the curse. Tell me everything. He was quiet for a long time. The bond must be completed before the blood moon, he said finally. His voice was measured now, controlled, the king reassembling himself word by word. Not just the marking, full completion. The bond must be sealed, body and soul. If it is not completed within 7 days of the initial claim, the curse activates. The mate begins to fade, just like Elowen. Seraphine's stomach turned. 7 days. You marked me at the gala. That was 4 days ago. He pulled back enough to look at her. His eyes were violet again, but dim, exhausted. We have 3 days. The blood moon rises on the night of the 7th day. If the bond is not complete by then, the curse will begin to drain you. And once it starts, it cannot be stopped. 3 days. She let the number settle in her chest like a stone dropped into still water. 3 days to complete a bond with a man she had known for less than a week. 3 days to defy a curse that had been unbroken for 3 centuries. 3 days before her body began to wither the way Eloin's had withered, one candle at a time. "Why did you not tell me sooner?" she asked. There was no accusation in her voice, just exhaustion. "Because I wanted you to choose me for the right reasons," he said. "Not because you were afraid of dying?" She looked at him, really looked at him, past the violet eyes and the scar and the jawline and the terrifying power that rolled off him like heat from a furnace. She looked at the man who had painted 100 portraits of a dead woman, who had searched for a century for a second chance, who had cried into her hair while her bones broke and reformed because losing another mate was a pain his 200-year-old heart could not survive. "I am choosing you," she said. "I chose you when I took your hand in the snow." He leaned down, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. His forehead touched hers. His breath was warm against her lips. She could feel the bond between them vibrating like a wire pulled taut, humming with something enormous and terrifying and inevitable. "Seraphine," he whispered. Her name in his mouth was a prayer offered by a man who had forgotten how to pray. She closed the distance. The kiss was not what she expected. It was not fierce or possessive or consuming the way she imagined an Alpha King's kiss would be. It was slow, careful, his lips pressed against hers with a gentleness that made her chest ache, as if she were something precious and he was something dangerous, and he was trying very hard to be the former without forgetting the latter. His hand came up to cup the back of her head. His fingers threaded through her hair, still damp with sweat, and he tilted her face slightly, deepening the kiss by degrees. She tasted salt, his tears or hers. She could not tell. She did not care. The bond flared. She felt it like a sunrise inside her ribcage, warmth and light flooding pathways that had been dark for years. She felt his heartbeat synchronize with hers. She felt his wolf reach for hers through the bond, a massive black creature pressing its muzzle against the cage where her white wolf was still struggling to break free. When he pulled back, his eyes were glowing. Not red, not the violet of command. Something new. Something that was only for her. 3 days, he said. 3 days, she echoed. He kissed her forehead, her cheekbone, the mark on her shoulder, which pulsed with warmth beneath his lips. "Rest now," he said. "Tomorrow we begin fighting the curse." She slept. For the first time in days, she slept without dreaming. When she woke, the world was different. It took her several seconds to understand how. She lay in the hospital bed, the morning light slanting through the window, and listened to things she had never been able to hear before. The heartbeat of a guard standing in the hallway outside, the scratch of a pen in Dr. Aldrich's office 2 rooms away, a bird landing on the windowsill, its tiny claws clicking against the stone, the blood moving through her own veins, faster now, hotter, carrying something electric. She sat up. The sheets pulled around her waist, and she looked down at her hands. They were the same hands, but different. The muscles in her forearms were more defined. Her fingernails were harder, sharper at the tips. She could see the veins beneath her skin, pulsing with a faint silver luminescence that faded even as she watched. She had grown, not dramatically, but she could feel it. 2 inches, maybe more. Her frame had filled out overnight, lean muscle replacing the soft, malnourished lines of a body that had been deliberately kept weak. She felt dense, solid, like her bones were made of something heavier than calcium. She stood up and nearly fell. The floor felt different. Everything felt different. Her senses were operating at a frequency she had never experienced. She could smell Theron's scent on the sheets, dark chocolate and tobacco and mountain air, and beneath it, layered like sediment in ancient rock, she could smell his emotional residue, fear, devotion, the sharp chemical tang of tears. She could smell Lysandra, too, jasmine and amber and the cold calculation beneath it. The scent trail led from the hallway outside the medical wing up through the east corridor and into a room Seraphine had not yet visited. And beneath Lysandra's scent, so faint that only a wolf operating at full capacity could detect it, was something else. Cedar wood, rain on warm grass, Cormac. The scent was old, hours old, but it was inside the palace. Seraphine's wolf stirred. Not the timid, drugged creature that had whimpered in the back of her mind for a decade. This wolf was awake, alert. Its hackles were rising. Something is wrong. Seraphine dressed quickly in clothes she found folded on a chair beside the bed. Simple things. Black trousers, a white shirt, boots that fit perfectly because someone had measured her feet while she slept. She moved through the corridors of Ironwood with a purpose she had not possessed 3 days ago. She found Theron in the war room, bent over a map table with General Hawthorne and 2 officers she did not recognize. He looked up when she entered, and the relief on his face was immediate and unguarded. "You should be resting," he said, crossing the room to her. "Theron!" She caught his arm. "I smelled Cormac." He went still. "Where?" "In the palace. The scent is old, but it is here, near Lysandra's quarters." Something shifted behind his eyes, a calculation running at speeds she could not follow. He turned to Hawthorne. "Lock the east wing. Sweep Lysandra's chambers. Now." Hawthorne moved without question. But they were too late. Not for Lysandra's treachery. That they discovered in fragments over the next 2 hours. A communication device hidden in a hollowed book on her shelf. Letters written in a cipher that Ironwood intelligence cracked in 40 minutes. Outgoing messages to Silver Creek dated over the past 3 days, detailing Seraphine's location within the palace, her daily routine, the gaps in the guard rotation, and most damningly, the exact timeline of the Blood Moon curse. Lysandra had told them everything. She had told them about the curse, about the 3-day deadline, about the antidote and the transformation. She had given Silver Creek every piece of information they needed to destroy the bond before it could be completed. They found the communication device. They found the letters. They did not find Lysandra. She was gone, vanished from the palace sometime during the night, slipping through the servant corridors she had managed for decades with the ease of a woman who had spent years learning every blind spot in her own security system. Theron read the decoded letters in silence. When he finished, he set them down on the table with a care that was more frightening than any display of rage. "She told them about the curse," he said quietly. "She told them that if they prevent the bond from completing before the blood moon, Seraphine dies. She gave them a murder weapon disguised as information." "Why?" Seraphine asked. She was standing across the table from him, her arms wrapped around herself. "Why would she do this?" Theron looked at her. His expression was the most honest she had ever seen it. "Because she loved me," he said. 50 years ago, before I knew what the curse meant, before I stopped looking for a mate, Lysandra offered herself, not as a fated mate, as a chosen one. She believed that if I accepted her willingly, the curse would not activate because she was not goddess chosen. I refused, not because she was not worthy, but because I could not give her what she wanted. I could not love her the way she needed to be loved. He paused. She waited. For 50 years, she waited for me to change my mind. And then I walked through a door with you on my arm, wearing my mark, smelling of my bond, and she understood that I never would. The weight of it settled over the room like snowfall. Jealousy does not excuse treason, General Hawthorne said from the doorway. He had returned empty-handed. No Lysandra, no trail. She had planned her exit as meticulously as she had planned everything else. No, Theron agreed. It does not. Sire, if Silver Creek has the curse timeline, they know tonight is day 6. They know the blood moon is tomorrow night. They will move before then. Double the perimeter guard, Theron ordered. Triple the rotation in the royal wing. No one enters or leaves without my personal authorization. It will not be enough, Seraphine said quietly. Both men looked at her. Lysandra managed this palace for decades, she said. She knows every door, every passage, every weakness. Whatever entry point she has given them, your guards will not find it in time, not before tomorrow night. She was right. They all knew she was right. Then we leave Ironwood, Theron said. I have a safe house in the northern mountains. It is off every record. Lysandra does not know it exists. Seraphine nodded. When? Now. Tonight. We drive through the night and reach the safe house by dawn. We complete the bond tomorrow under the blood moon and break the curse. By the time Silver Creek realizes we are gone, it will be over. It was a good plan. It was the right plan. They never got the chance to execute it. The attack came at sundown, not through the gates, not through the walls, through the tunnels. Ancient maintenance shafts that ran beneath the palace foundations, built centuries ago and decommissioned decades before Theron was born. Tunnels that appeared on no current blueprint, but that Lysandra, with her obsessive knowledge of every stone in Ironwood, had documented in a private journal that was now in Silver Creek's possession. Seraphine was in the master suite, packing a small bag for the journey north. Theron was in the armory, selecting weapons. They were separated by 4 corridors, 2 staircases, and 300 feet of ancient stone. She heard the wolves before she saw them, a low, coordinated growl that vibrated through the floor beneath her feet. Her new senses, still raw and overwhelming, detected their sense a fraction of a second before the wall panel beside the fireplace swung open, and 3 shifted wolves poured into the room like shadows made of teeth and muscle. They were Silver Creek wolves. She recognized the scent even before she recognized the markings. Pack wolves she had grown up alongside, wolves she had served meals to, wolves who had watched Cormac laugh at her and done nothing. The first one lunged. Seraphine's new body reacted before her mind caught up. She dodged left, a movement so fast it surprised her as much as the attacker. The wolf sailed past her and crashed into the dresser, shattering the mirror. She grabbed the iron poker from beside the fireplace and swung it with strength she did not know she possessed. The impact connected with the second wolf's skull. It yelped and staggered sideways, but the third was already behind her, jaws closing around the back of her shirt, dragging her toward the open tunnel entrance. She fought. She fought with everything her newly awakened body could give her. She broke the third wolf's grip, spinning and driving the poker into its shoulder. It released her with a howl. But there were more coming through the tunnel. 5, 7, a dozen. Silver Creek had sent an army through a hole in the wall. And then the cloth came over her mouth. Wolfsbane. Concentrated. The scent hit her like a wall, and her legs buckled instantly. Her newly liberated wolf howled in her mind, thrashing against the chemical assault. But the dose was massive. Industrial. designed not to suppress, but to incapacitate. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was Theron's roar, distant, anguished, a sound that shook the mountain itself. Then nothing. She woke in the dark. The floor beneath her was cold stone, rough, damp. The air smelled of mildew and rust and something chemical that burned the inside of her nostrils. Her wrists were bound behind her back with restraints that felt like silver, because they were. The metal seared against her skin with a constant low-grade burn that made her teeth clench. She was underground. She knew that before her eyes adjusted. She could feel the weight of earth above her, the absence of wind, the compressed silence that belongs only to places that have been buried. A cellar, a dungeon, Silver Creek. She had been here before. Not in this specific room, but in this world. The world of concrete and iron and the particular kind of cold that seeps into your bones when you are somewhere no one is supposed to find you. Panic rose in her throat like bile. She shoved it down, head up, shoulders back. She assessed. The restraints were silver, but not pure. She could feel that now, with senses sharp enough to distinguish alloy compositions by touch. Perhaps 70% silver, 30% steel. Painful, but not paralyzing. The wolfsbane in her system was fading. Her wolf was clawing through the chemical fog, slower than it would have without a decade of prior suppression, but advancing. She needed time, time she did not have. The blood moon was tomorrow night. A door opened somewhere above her. Footsteps on stone stairs, slow, deliberate. The cadence of a man who knows the person he is visiting cannot leave. The single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered on. Cormac Aldridge stood at the base of the stairs. He was not wearing a tuxedo this time. No champagne glass, no smirk. He wore tactical black, a Kevlar vest over a fitted shirt, and his sandy blonde hair was pushed back from a face that had aged 5 years in 5 days. He looked thinner, harder. The golden boy sheen had been scraped away, and what remained beneath was something hungrier, something that had watched a kitchen servant become a queen and could not reconcile the loss. He looked at her for a long time. "You know," he said, pulling a chair from the corner and sitting down 3 feet from her, "when I rejected you at the gala, I thought that would be the end of it. Omega goes away. Beta marries Gamma's daughter. Life goes on." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But then you walked back through those doors on the arm of the most dangerous wolf alive, and he marked you. In front of me. In front of everyone. He looked at me like I was dirt on his shoe, and he put his mouth on your neck, and he took what should have been mine." "I was never yours," Seraphine said. Her voice was steady. Remarkably steady, given that her wrists were burning and her wolf was fighting through a chemical haze, and the man who had shattered her heart 5 days ago was sitting close enough to touch. "You made sure of that." "I made a mistake." "You made a choice." Cormac's jaw tightened. "I did not know what you were. None of us did. If I had known you were alpha blood, if I had known about the suppression, I never would have." "You never would have what?" she interrupted. "Rejected me? You would have kept me if I had been powerful enough. If my bloodline had been impressive enough. If I had met your standards." She leaned forward. The silver restraints bit into her wrists, and she did not care. "You did not reject me because I was an Omega, Cormac. You rejected me because you did not see me as a person. I was furniture, background noise, the girl who cleaned your floors. Whether I was Omega or Alpha or the moon goddess herself would not have changed the fact that you looked at me and saw nothing worth keeping." Cormac's face darkened. The charm evaporated. What replaced it was the same ugly sneer she had seen at the gala, the one he wore when the mask slipped and the real Cormac showed through. "Your king is not coming," he said. His voice was flat now. "Transactional. Lysandra told us about the curse. The blood moon is tomorrow night. If the bond is not completed by then, you start to fade. You die. Slowly." He paused. Or you reject Theron Blackwood. Publicly. Sever the bond. Accept me as your mate instead. My father and Alpha Miller have arranged everything. We complete the bond tonight. You live. You come home. She stared at him. The audacity of it. The breathtaking, staggering audacity of a man who had laughed in her face, who had kissed another woman while her bond bled, who had called her worthless in front of everyone she knew, sitting in a dungeon offering to save her life in exchange for her soul. "Home," she repeated. "You want me to come home? To Silver Creek? To the kitchens?" "To the Beta's chambers," Cormac corrected. "As my mate. As my equal." "Your equal." She tasted the word. It was rotten. "I was your equal 5 days ago, and you could not see it." Cormac stood up. The chair scraped against the stone floor. He paced the small room, agitation rolling off him in waves that her enhanced senses could read like a book. Anger, desire, fear. Underneath it all, a desperate, scrambling shame that he would sooner die than acknowledge. "You do not have a choice, Seraphine," he said. "Blackwood cannot reach you in time. Even if he finds this location, even if he fights through the guard, the blood moon is 18 hours away. You will not survive the curse." "Then I will not survive." He stopped pacing, stared at her. "I would rather fade," she said, "than belong to a man who only wants me because someone else showed him what I was worth." The words landed in the silence between them like a blade driven into wood. Cormac's face twisted. For a moment she thought he would hit her. His fist clenched, his body coiled. The beta aura flared, pressing down on her with the familiar weight of dominance that had made her cower for 22 years. She did not cower. She sat on the cold stone floor of a dungeon, hands bound in silver, wolfsbane still clouding her blood, and she looked up at the man who thought he owned her with eyes that burned like molten silver. Cormac took a step back. Involuntary. The reaction of a predator who has just realized the prey has teeth. "You have until dawn," he said. His voice was tight, controlled. The voice of a man pretending he is not afraid. "Think about it, Sarah. Think about what dying feels like. Think about whether your pride is worth more than your life." He walked up the stairs. The light clicked off. The door closed. Darkness. Seraphine sat in the silence and listened to her own heartbeat. It was strong, faster than normal. Beneath it, she could feel the bond. Stretched thin across whatever distance separated her from Theron, vibrating like a wire pulled to its breaking point, but still there, still alive, still humming with a frequency that said, "I am here, I am here, I am coming." She closed her eyes. She reached inward, not to her mind, not to her fear, to the place below all of that, the deep, primal, ancient place where her wolf lived. The wolf that had been caged for a decade. The wolf that had been poisoned and suppressed and told it did not exist. The wolf that had howled when the antidote broke its chains. It was there. Massive. White. Burning with a light that had nothing to do with the moon and everything to do with the woman who carried it. The wolf looked at her with silver eyes. "They poisoned us," Seraphine said. The wolf growled. "They caged us." The growl deepened. "They think we need saving." The wolf bared its teeth, and in that baring, in the flash of ivory fangs in the darkness of her own mind, Seraphine felt something that had been absent for 22 years click into place. She was not waiting for rescue. She was not hoping for salvation. She was not the girl in the kitchen, or the Omega in the snow, or the placeholder in the palace hallway. She was an alpha, a high-tier alpha with royal blood, and a wolf the color of starfire, and a rage so pure and clean it burned away every trace of wolfsbane left in her bloodstream. She flexed her wrists against the silver restraints. They were 70% silver, 30% steel. A month ago, that would have been enough to hold her for a lifetime. Tonight, it was not nearly enough. The silver hissed against her skin. It burned. She did not care. She pulled. The metal groaned. Somewhere above her, in a pack house that had kept her prisoner for 22 years, Cormac Aldridge was pouring himself a drink and congratulating himself on his leverage. He did not know that the girl in the dungeon was not a girl anymore. He did not know that the chains were cracking. He did not know that by dawn, the white wolf would be free, and she would be hungry. The chains broke at 3:17 in the morning. She knew the exact time because she could hear the grandfather clock in the hallway above her, its pendulum swinging with a mechanical heartbeat that had counted down every second of her captivity. She had listened to it for hours while the wolfsbane bled out of her system and the silver ate into her wrists, and the white wolf inside her paced and snarled and waited. The restraints did not snap cleanly. They bent first, the metal groaning under pressure that should not have been possible from a woman her size. The silver component burned channels into her skin that would scar. She did not care. Pain was familiar. Pain was manageable. Pain was a language she had been fluent in since she was 6 years old, and the only change now was that she was done letting it be the only language she spoke. The left cuff gave first. The weld at the hinge buckled, and the metal peeled apart like the skin of a fruit. She pulled her wrist free, and the air hit the raw, silver-burned flesh, and she hissed through her teeth. The right cuff followed 30 seconds later. Easier now. Her muscles remembered what strength felt like. They were remembering more of it by the minute. She stood. The dungeon was small, 10 by 10. Stone walls, stone floor, stone ceiling. One door at the top of a narrow staircase. No windows, no ventilation except a crack beneath the door that carried the scents of the world above. She catalogued those scents now the way a general catalogues an enemy position. 4 guards, 3 in shifted wolf form, 1 in human form, positioned at the top of the stairs. Beyond them, the narrow service corridor that connected the basement level to the main floor of the Silver Creek pack house. She could smell the gymnasium above, floor wax and sweat, permanently embedded in the concrete. The kitchens to the east, where she had spent 22 years of her life scrubbing other people's messes. And Cormac. His scent was strongest near the east wing, second floor, the Beta family quarters. He was asleep, or trying to be. His scent carried the chemical signature of adrenaline that had not fully metabolized. He was anxious. Good. She climbed the stairs. She did not creep. She did not tiptoe. She climbed the way a woman climbs when she is done hiding in the dark. Each footstep deliberate on the cold stone. Each breath measured. Her wolf was fully awake now, pressing against the inside of her skin, begging to be released. Not yet, Seraphine told it. Soon. The guard at the door heard her coming. She could hear his heartbeat accelerate through the wood. The lock clicked. The door swung inward, and a flashlight beam caught her in the face. What the? She moved. Her new body was a revelation. Faster than she had any right to be. Stronger than the muscle memory of 22 years as an Omega knew how to process. She closed the distance between herself and the human guard in the time it took him to inhale. and she drove the heel of her palm into his sternum with an alpha's force concentrated into a surface area smaller than a fist. He flew backward. His body hit the wall hard enough to crack the plaster. He slid to the floor, unconscious before his head completed its downward arc. The three shifted wolves reacted simultaneously. They were Silver Creek warriors, trained since adolescence, operating on pack instinct and muscle memory. They were fast and coordinated, and they had been told they were guarding an Omega. They were not guarding an Omega. Seraphine grabbed the unconscious guard's tactical vest and swung it like a shield as the first wolf lunged. Its jaws clamped onto the Kevlar instead of her arm. She pivoted, using the wolf's momentum against it, and drove it headfirst into the concrete wall. It yelped and crumpled. The second wolf circled left. The third circled right. Flanking pattern. Basic pack assault tactics. She had watched wolves train from the kitchen window for years. She knew the formations even if she had never been allowed to practice them. The second wolf launched itself at her legs. She jumped, not the clumsy, earthbound jump of the girl who used to trip over her own heels. A vertical leap that carried her 3 feet off the ground and over the wolf's snapping jaws. She landed behind it, grabbed it by the scruff, and threw it into the third wolf with enough force to send both animals tumbling down the staircase she had just climbed. Silence. 4 guards, 12 seconds. She was not even breathing hard. She looked down at her hands. They were shaking. Not from fear, from the sheer, overwhelming strangeness of being able to do what her body had just done. For 22 years, she had been a passenger in a vehicle that someone else had drained the fuel from. Now the tank was full, and the engine was roaring, and she was behind the wheel for the first time in her life. She did not have time to marvel at it. She moved through the service corridor and up a secondary staircase that led to the ground floor. The pack house was quiet at this hour. Most of Silver Creek was asleep. She could hear the collective heartbeat of over 100 wolves, a slow, synchronized rhythm that pulsed through the building like the breathing of a sleeping giant. She found the main hall, the gymnasium that doubled as a ballroom for pack events, the same room where Cormac had laughed at her 5 days ago. The fairy lights were gone. The silk drapes had been taken down. It was just a gymnasium again. Bare walls, polished floor, the faint ghost of champagne and humiliation lingering in the air. She crossed the room and walked out the front door of the Silver Creek pack house. Nobody stopped her. Nobody saw her. The 2 perimeter guards were at the south gate, their attention focused outward. They were watching for threats coming in, not prisoners walking out. The night air hit her face, and she gasped, not from the cold, from the sheer, overwhelming beauty of being free. The sky was enormous above her, scattered with stars so bright they looked like puncture wounds in black fabric, leaking light from whatever burned on the other side. The forest stretched in every direction, ancient pines silver-tipped with frost. The moon hung low on the horizon, fat and swollen and tinged with the faintest blush of red. Tomorrow night it would be crimson, the blood moon. She had less than 20 hours. She reached for the bond. It was there, stretched thin across miles of mountain and forest, vibrating at a frequency that bordered on pain, but intact, alive. And through it, she felt him. Theron. Not his thoughts, not his words, just the raw, unfiltered essence of his emotional state, transmitted through a connection that transcended language. What she felt made her chest constrict. Terror, fury, desperation. The particular flavor of anguish that belongs to a man who is tearing the world apart with his bare hands because the woman he loves has vanished, and every second that passes is a second she might be dying. She closed her eyes and pushed back through the bond, every ounce of calm she could muster, every grain of strength. A single, wordless message carried on the frequency of their shared heartbeat. I am here. I am free. I am coming to you. The bond pulsed. Once, twice, and then she felt him change direction. He was coming. She ran, not away from Silver Creek, not toward Ironwood, toward the space between. The neutral territory in the mountain pass where the ancient pine forest gave way to open ground and the sky was wide enough to hold everything that was about to happen. She ran and her body sang with the joy of movement. Her bare feet. She had lost the boots somewhere in the fight, or maybe she had never put them on. She could not remember. Found purchase on the frozen ground as if the earth itself was catching her with every stride. The wind streamed through her hair. Her lungs burned with cold, clean air, and her muscles fired in sequences that felt choreographed by something divine. She could hear them behind her now, not close, but coming. The Silver Creek wolves had discovered the unconscious guards, the empty dungeon, the open front door. She could hear Cormac's voice, raw and ragged, barking orders she was too far away to distinguish. And ahead of her, growing closer with every heartbeat, she could hear something else. A convoy, moving fast. Engines roaring through the mountain roads with the urgency of a man who has been given a compass heading to the only thing in the world that matters. She burst through the tree line into the clearing at the base of the mountain pass. The moon was setting behind the western ridge, painting the open ground in shades of silver and shadow. The clearing was wide, perhaps 200 yards across, ringed by ancient pines that stood like sentinels. The air was crystalline, still, the kind of silence that exists only in places where something enormous is about to happen. Headlights appeared on the mountain road. 4 black SUVs moving in formation, their high beams cutting through the darkness like the eyes of wolves on the hunt. They skidded to a halt at the edge of the clearing. Doors opened before the vehicles had fully stopped. Theron. He moved through the headlight beams like a force of nature. He was not wearing a suit this time. Black tactical gear, no coat. His dark hair was wild, his face stripped of every diplomatic mask he had ever worn. What remained was raw and primal and desperate. He saw her, and he stopped. For 3 heartbeats, the most powerful wolf on the continent stood motionless in the middle of a frozen clearing and looked at the woman running toward him with an expression that dismantled every wall he had ever built. Then, he was moving, covering ground with strides that ate the distance between them. She ran toward him, and he ran toward her, and when they collided, it was not a gentle meeting. It was a collision. His arms locked around her, and he lifted her off the ground entirely, crushing her against his chest so tightly she could feel his heart slamming against his ribs. He buried his face in her neck, in her hair. He inhaled her scent, like a drowning man breaking the surface. She felt his entire body shaking. The Alpha King, the Wolf of Death, the man who had burned rogue encampments and stared down council coups and ruled a continent for 2 centuries. Trembling. "I thought I lost you," he said into her hair. His voice was wrecked beyond recognition. "I tore Ironwood apart. I had every wolf on the continent searching. I could feel you through the bond, but I could not find you, and the distance was wrong. The direction kept shifting, and I thought." He pulled back. His hands framed her face. His thumbs swept across her cheekbones. His eyes, violet and wild and bright with unshed tears, searched hers with the intensity of a man confirming that the person in front of him is real and solid and alive. Then he saw her wrists. The silver burns were raw, red and blistered and angry, circling both wrists like bracelets made of pain. His expression changed. The desperation did not leave. But something else arrived alongside it. Something ancient. Something that smelled of blood and fire and the absolute, irreversible conviction of a predator who has identified the creature that hurt what belongs to him. Seraphine. His voice was very quiet. Who did this to you? I did it to myself, she said, getting free. He looked at her. Past the burns, past the torn clothes and the bare feet, and the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the medical wing when Dr. Aldrich revealed the truth about her blood, with pride. You freed yourself, he said. I did. Before I could reach you. Yes. Something shifted in his expression. A recalibration so subtle that only a mate bonded at the soul level could have detected it. He was not looking at a woman he had rescued. He was looking at a woman who had rescued herself. And the distinction mattered. It mattered more than anything. I will kill them, he said, matter of fact, like announcing the weather. Cormac. Alpha Miller. Lysandra, every wolf who touched you. No, she said. He blinked. They are mine, she said. This is my fight, Theron. My pack, my history, my poison, my chains. If you fight this battle for me, I will always be the girl you saved. And I am done being saved. He stared at her for a long time. She watched the war behind his eyes. Every instinct he possessed, 200 years of dominance and protection, and the primal, overwhelming need to destroy anything that threatened his mate, fighting against the truth of what she was asking. She was asking him to let her be what she was, not his queen, not his rescue, not his project, his equal. You are infuriating, he said softly. I am an alpha, she replied. We are supposed to be infuriating. The ghost of a smile. The first one she had seen on his face since the night in the garden when he had told her to keep her head up. How do you want to do this? He asked. Before she could answer, the trees at the far edge of the clearing exploded. Silver Creek. They came in force. 30 wolves, maybe more, pouring from the tree line in a wave of fur and teeth and snarling aggression. At their center, shifted and massive in his brown-furred wolf form, was Cormac. Flanking him were his father the Beta and a dozen senior warriors, all in full shift, all bearing the desperate fury of a pack that has gambled everything on one night and cannot afford to lose. Behind them, on foot, in a white coat that billowed in the wind like a surrender flag she clearly did not intend, was Lysandra. She had come to watch. Theron's wolves formed up instantly. 20 Ironwood elite guard, already shifted, flanking their king. They were outnumbered but not outmatched. Ironwood wolves were larger, stronger, trained in mountain warfare that made Silver Creek's flatland tactics look like children playing in a yard. But Seraphine was not looking at the armies. She was looking at Cormac. The brown wolf stood in the center of the clearing, head low, hackles raised. His eyes found hers across the distance. She could read the calculation in them, even in wolf form. He was looking at the girl he had rejected and trying to reconcile her with the woman who had broken silver restraints and disabled 4 guards and walked out of his dungeon without anyone hearing her leave. He could not reconcile it. She could see that too. Seraphine, Theron said, his hand on her shoulder, not restraining, offering, ready to step forward or step back, depending on what she chose. She reached up and placed her hand over his, squeezed once, let go. Then she walked forward, alone, into the space between the two packs, into the no-man's land of moonlight and frozen ground, and the electric charge of 30 wolves ready to tear each other apart. She walked the way she had walked out of the ballroom 5 days ago, the night Cormac rejected her. Head up, shoulders back, each step deliberate. But she was not the same woman who had walked out of that ballroom. That woman had been broken and bleeding and holding herself together with nothing but dignity and the refusal to cry in public. This woman was holding herself together with power that made the ground vibrate beneath her bare feet. She stopped in the center of the clearing, halfway between Theron and Cormac, halfway between the old life and the new. She stood in the moonlight, and she felt the white wolf inside her pressing against her skin like a sun trying to break through cloud cover. "Cormac," she said. Her voice carried across the clearing without effort. It was not the voice of the kitchen girl. It was not even the voice of the queen. It was something else entirely. Something that had been sleeping for a decade and was very, very awake. "You wanted a warrior, a queen. You said I was not enough," the brown wolf growled. "Your pack poisoned me for 10 years to make sure I would never become what I was born to be. You laughed at me in front of everyone I have ever known. You locked me in a dungeon and told me my only option was to belong to you." She paused. "Let the silence fill the clearing like water filling a basin. I want you to watch what happens next." She let go. It was not a shift. A shift implies process, transition, this gradual transformation of one form into another. What happened to Seraphine Hart in the center of that moonlit clearing was not gradual. It was not a process. It was a detonation. The power that had been bottled inside her for a decade, suppressed by Wolf's Bane and Silver Nitrate and the systematic cruelty of people who should have protected her, tore free in a single cataclysmic instant. Her clothes disintegrated. Her bones did not break and reform. They exploded and reconstituted in the same heartbeat, a transformation so fast that the human eye could not track it. One frame, she was a woman standing barefoot in the snow. The next frame, she was something else entirely. The wolf was enormous, massive, towering over the Silver Creek wolves like a cathedral towers over houses. Her fur was pure, luminous white, the color of starlight captured in silk. It did not just reflect the moonlight, it generated its own. She glowed. The clearing flooded with silver radiance that turned the snow to diamonds and cast shadows so sharp they looked carved. Her eyes were incandescent silver, burning with an intelligence and a fury that transcended anything animal. She was not a wolf in the way that the creatures flanking Cormac were wolves. She was something from before. Something that belonged to the age when the moon goddess walked the earth and her chosen avatars were not myths, but living, breathing forces of nature. The white wolf, the symbol of the goddess's favor. A legend that had not walked the earth in 500 years. And she was furious. The growl that rolled from her throat was not a sound. It was a geological event. It vibrated through the ground, through the trees, through the bones of every wolf in the clearing. Windows in the Silver Creek pack house, half a mile away, shattered. Pine trees at the edge of the clearing shed their snow in miniature avalanches. The air itself seemed to compress, as if the atmosphere was making room for something it was not designed to contain. Cormac's wolf stumbled backward, his ears flattened, his tail tucked. Every instinct encoded in his DNA was screaming a single, overwhelming instruction. Submit. The Ironwood wolves held their ground, but only because their king was standing behind them, radiating a calm authority that anchored them against the tidal wave of alpha force pouring from the white wolf. Even so, several of them whimpered. Theron did not whimper. He stood at the edge of the clearing and watched his mate become a legend with an expression of such profound, devastating awe that General Hawthorne, standing beside him, had to look away. It felt too private to witness. Seraphine turned her silver gaze on the Silver Creek wolves. Kneel. The command did not come from her throat. It came from everywhere. It resonated in the minds of every wolf present, bypassing ears and auditory processing and speaking directly to the primal, ancient place where pack hierarchy was not a social construct, but a law of nature as fundamental as gravity. Alpha Miller's wolf collapsed first. His legs buckled as if the tendons had been cut. He hit the ground muzzle first, a whimper escaping his jaws. The beta followed. Then the warriors. One by one, like dominoes made of fur and muscle and shattered pride, the Silver Creek pack fell. Cormac fought it. She could see him fighting. His legs shook. His muscles seized. He locked his joints and gritted his teeth and poured every ounce of beta authority he possessed into the singular act of remaining upright. His eyes bulged. Veins stood out along his neck. A sound escaped his throat that was half growl, half sob. The noise a man makes when his body is betraying him and his mind has not yet accepted it. She walked toward him. Each step was deliberate. Each paw print left a mark in the snow that glowed faintly silver before fading. She closed the distance between them until her massive muzzle was inches from his face. She could smell everything on him. Fear, shame, the chemical residue of the whiskey he had been drinking in his quarters while she was breaking chains in his dungeon, and beneath it all, so deep he probably did not even know it was there, the acrid, burning stench of regret. She opened her jaws, rows of teeth, each one longer than his claws. Each one capable of severing his spine with the casual ease of a human snapping a pencil. She held them there, framing his face, so close that her breath ruffled the fur between his ears. She could kill him. It would be easy. It would be satisfying. It would be the kind of justice that fairy tales are built on, the villain destroyed by the hero he created. But she was not a fairy tale. She was something better. She was a woman who had decided who she wanted to be. Theron's voice entered her mind through the bond. Soft, proud, aching with something she would later recognize as love so large it had no edges. Mercy is the privilege of the powerful, my love. Death is too easy. Let him live with his mistake. She exhaled. Hot breath blasted Cormac's face. She closed her jaws. Then she did something worse than killing him. She turned her back. The ultimate dismissal. In wolf culture, in the language of a species that communicated as much through gesture as through sound, turning your back on an enemy was not mercy. It was erasure. It was the declaration that the creature behind you was so far beneath you that it did not even warrant the dignity of being watched. Cormac's wolf broke. His legs gave out. He hit the ground with a sound that was more human than animal, a choking, gasping, wretched sound, and he bared his neck to the sky. Full submission, total and complete and irreversible. She did not look back. She walked across the clearing to where Lysandra stood. The woman had not moved. She stood in her white coat, her blood-orange hair vivid against the moonlit snow, and watched the white wolf approach with the expression of someone who has just realized that the chess game they thought they were winning was never chess at all. It was war. And they brought the wrong weapons. Seraphine shifted back. The transformation was instantaneous. One heartbeat wolf, The next heartbeat, woman. She stood naked in the snow, but she was not cold. The alpha heat radiating from her skin melted the frost in a 2-foot radius around her feet. Steam rose from her shoulders. Theron was already there. His coat settled over her shoulders before the cold could touch her. He stood behind her, a wall of warmth and fury and restraint, and let her lead. "Lysandra," Seraphine said. The woman's sea-glass eyes were wide. For the first time since Seraphine had met her, there was no calculation behind them. Just shock. Just the blank animal recognition of having severely and catastrophically miscalculated. "You told them about the curse," Seraphine said. "You gave them the timeline. You gave them the tunnels. You handed them a weapon designed to kill me." Lysandra opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "He was supposed to be mine," she whispered. Her voice cracked on the last word. 50 years I waited. 50 years I ran his household, managed his affairs, stood at his side while he searched for a ghost. And then you, a kitchen girl, a nobody. He chose a nobody over me. "He did not choose me over you," Seraphine said. "The goddess chose me for him. You could have accepted that. You could have been an ally. Instead, you tried to kill me, to keep a man who was never yours." Lysandra's chin trembled. Just once. A micro-expression of pain so brief that anyone without alpha senses would have missed it. Seraphine saw it. She filed it away, not with anger, with something uncomfortably close to understanding. "General Hawthorne," she said without turning. "Lady Lysandra Ashworth is to be escorted to the North Watch outpost. She will serve there indefinitely as a records clerk. She is stripped of her household title and all council privileges." Lysandra's eyes widened. "North Watch is in the Arctic Circle. There is nothing there but snow and silence. Then you will have plenty of time to reflect." Hawthorne stepped forward and took Lysandra by the arm. She did not resist. She looked at Theron one last time, searching his face for something, anything, a flicker of the affection she had spent 5 decades trying to earn. He looked back at her with the expression of a man closing a door he had not realized was still open. "Goodbye, Lysandra," he said. They led her away. Seraphine turned to the Silver Creek wolves. They were still on the ground, still pinned by the residual weight of her alpha command. She walked toward them, Theron's coat wrapped around her shoulders like armor made of warmth. "Alpha Miller," she said. "You knew who my father was. You knew what I was. You ordered a child drugged into weakness so she could never threaten your position." Alpha Miller shifted back to human form. He was an old man, gray-haired, soft-bellied, the kind of man who had held power for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be powerless. He was remembering now. "Dr. Hargrove," she continued, "you administered Wolf's Bane to a 12-year-old girl and told her it was medicine. You watched her struggle and fail and believe she was broken, and you said nothing." Hargrove was crying, silently. He did not shift back. He could not. His wolf had submitted so completely that it had locked his shift. "Both of you are stripped of your rank and exiled to the wastelands," Seraphine said. "If you set foot in any territory under the protection of the Blackwood Crown, you will be executed." She paused. "And Cormac." The brown wolf on the ground flinched at his own name. "Look at me." He raised his head. He shifted back to human form because she wanted him to hear this with human ears. She wanted him to understand every word. He knelt in the snow, shirtless and shaking, his face streaked with tears and snot and the particular devastation of a man who has just been forced to confront the full scope of his own stupidity. "You keep your title," she said. Hope flickered in his eyes. Desperate. Pathetic. The hope of a drowning man seeing a piece of driftwood. "You will remain the beta heir of Silver Creek," she said. "You will live a long, healthy, comfortable life." The hope grew. And every single day of that long, healthy, comfortable life, you will turn on the news and see my face. You will hear my name. You will watch me rule the kingdom that you thought I was too small to stand in. And you will know, with absolute, permanent, inescapable certainty, exactly what you threw away. The hope died. It did not die quickly. It died the way a candle dies when someone cups their hand around the flame and slowly, deliberately, cuts off the air. She watched it go out behind his eyes. She watched the moment he understood that she was not punishing his body. She was punishing his memory. She was building a prison made of regret and locking him inside it forever. "Brutal," Theron murmured behind her. He kissed the top of her head. "I love it." Seraphine looked at Silver Creek one last time. The pack house in the distance. The kitchens where she had spent 22 years. The laundry room where she had slept on a cot that was too short for her body. The place that had called itself her home while systematically destroying everything she was. She turned her back on it. She did not look again. The blood moon rose at 8:47 the following evening. They had driven north, not to Ironwood, which was still being swept for any remaining security breaches, but to the place Theron had mentioned before the attack, the safe house in the northern mountains. It was not what she expected. Not a bunker or a fortress or a military installation. It was a cabin, stone and timber, built into a hillside overlooking a valley so beautiful it looked painted. A stream ran through the property, frozen now but glittering under the stars like a ribbon of crushed crystal. The sky above was vast and dark and heavy, with the kind of silence that makes you aware of your own breathing. The cabin had one bedroom, one fireplace, one window that faced east, toward the rising moon. They had spent the day in a kind of quiet that was neither awkward nor tense. It was the quiet of two people standing on the edge of something enormous, gathering themselves for the jump. Theron built a fire. Seraphine sat on the floor in front of it, wrapped in a blanket, watching the flames and feeling the bond between them pulse with increasing urgency. The blood moon was coming. The curse's deadline was approaching like a tide that would not be turned. "Tell me about Elowen," she said. He looked at her from across the fire, surprised. "I want to know," she said. "I want to know who she was, not how she died. Who she was." He was quiet for a long time. "She sang," he said, badly, off-key and too loud and with complete, fearless joy. "She sang while she cooked, and while she bathed, and while she walked through the gardens, and the staff pretended not to hear because she was the queen. And you do not tell the queen she cannot carry a tune." He paused. A smile ghosted across his mouth. The first real, unguarded, uncomplicated smile she had ever seen on him. "She argued with me about everything. Policy. Strategy. What to have for dinner. She told me once that being king did not make me right. It just made me loud. I think about that at least once a week." His smile faded. "She was brave. Not in the way warriors are brave. In the way that people who love without reservation are brave. She knew the curse was killing her. She knew it months before the doctors confirmed it. And she never once asked me to release her from the bond. She chose to stay. She chose to love me, even though it was costing her everything." He looked at Seraphine. "I do not want that kind of bravery from you," he said. "I do not want you to stay because you are willing to die for this. I want you to stay Because we are going to live. She held his gaze. Then let us break the curse. The moon rose. They went outside. The valley spread below them, silver and shadow, and above them the sky was dominated by the moon in a way Seraphine had never seen before. It was enormous, swollen, and it was red, not the gentle blush of a harvest moon. This was deep, arterial crimson, the color of old blood and new beginnings, and the kind of magic that does not care about logic or science or the careful plans of frightened men. The bond between them was screaming. She could feel it vibrating in her bones, in her teeth, in the roots of her hair. It was pulling them together with a force that was beyond physical, beyond emotional, beyond anything she had a word for. It was as if the universe itself had reached down and grabbed them both by the heart and was dragging them toward each other with the patient, irresistible authority of gravity. They stood facing each other in the moonlight. The blood moon painted everything in shades of red and silver. Theron reached for her. His hand trembled. "Are you sure?" he asked. She remembered Lysandra calling her a placeholder. She remembered Cormac telling her she was nothing. She remembered 16 years of iron pills and 22 years of kitchen floors and a cot in a laundry room. She remembered the man in the snow who had said, "Head up, shoulders back. You are not a victim tonight." She remembered his paintings of a woman he had loved and lost, his tears in her hair during the antidote, his hand shaking when he touched her ankle in the stable. She did not remember anyone ever asking her if she was sure about anything. "Do not ask me," she said. "This time, I decide." She stepped forward. She placed both hands on his chest. She could feel his heart hammering beneath her palms. 200 years old and terrified. She rose on her toes. She tilted her head. She pressed her mouth to the mark she had already placed on his neck and felt it pulse beneath her lips. "I choose you," she whispered against his skin. "Not because the goddess said so. Not because you saved me. Not because the curse demands it. I choose you because you are the first person who ever saw me, the real me, and I want to be seen for the rest of my life." She extended her canines. She bit down on the existing mark, deepening it, completing it. Theron made a sound. Not a roar this time. Something rawer. Something that came from the place beneath the king and the warrior and the 200-year-old immortal. A sound from the man. Just the man. The one who had been alone in a palace built for two. He caught her as she pulled back. His hands cupped her face with a tenderness that made her heart crack along its fault lines. He looked at her the way the painter had looked at the woman in the wildflower field, like she was the only source of light in the world, and he had been living in the dark. "My turn," he said, hoarse, barely above a whisper. He swept her hair aside. His fingers were gentle against the curve of her neck. He lowered his mouth to her shoulder, to the mark he had placed there 5 days ago in a ballroom full of kneeling wolves. "I choose you," he said. His breath was warm on her skin. "I choose you because you are fierce and kind, and you broke your own chains when I could not reach you. I choose you because you do not need me, and you chose me anyway. I choose you because I am terrified of losing you, and that terror is the most alive I have felt in 100 years." He bit down. The completion hit them both simultaneously. If the initial marking had been a cable snapping into place, this was a fusion, a merging. Two rivers converging into one current so powerful it reshaped the landscape of everything it touched. The bond did not just connect them. It wove them together at the molecular level. His memories bled into hers. She saw flashes, fragments, a century of loneliness compressed into a single heartbeat. She saw Elowin laughing. She saw Elowin dying. She saw Theron standing in the rain outside a grave, not crying, because he had forgotten how. She saw him painting the same face over and over in a stone room, trying to remember the exact shape of a smile that was slipping away. And he saw her, the kitchen, the pills, the cot, the girl who talked to a wolf that could not answer, the woman who walked out of a ballroom with her head up and her heart in pieces, the alpha who broke silver with her bare hands. The curse fought back. She felt it, a darkness at the edges of the bond, pressing inward, trying to corrupt the connection, trying to drain her the way it had drained Elowin. It was old magic, vicious, patient. It had been waiting for this moment for a century, but it had not anticipated her. The white wolf rose inside Seraphine like a sun cresting the horizon. It met the curse at the threshold of the bond, and it did not fight it. It consumed it. The goddess's power, dormant in her bloodline for generations, activated by a decade of suppression and released in a cataclysmic rebirth, burned through the curse like fire through cobwebs. The darkness screamed. A thin, high sound that only they could hear. The death cry of a 300-year-old vengeance finally meeting something older than itself. Then it was gone. The bond settled. Deep, permanent, unshakable. She could feel him in every cell of her body. His heartbeat was her heartbeat. His breath was her breath. Two halves of something that had never been whole until this exact moment. Standing in the red moonlight on a mountainside that had been waiting 3 centuries for this night. Theron pulled back. His eyes were glowing. Not red, not violet. Both. Swirling together like galaxies colliding. And they were wet. The curse, he said. His voice broke on the word, and he did not try to fix it. I can feel it. It is gone. Seraphine. It is gone. She placed her hand over his heart. She could feel the space where the curse had lived for 200 years. It was empty now. Clean. Like a room that had been shuttered for decades and finally had its windows thrown open. You are free, she said. He dropped to his knees. The Alpha King. The Wolf of Death. The ruler of a continent. He knelt on the frozen ground before the woman who had been a kitchen servant 6 days ago, and he pressed his forehead against her stomach, and he wept. She held him, her fingers in his dark hair, his arms around her waist. The blood moon turning the world around them into something sacred. 6 months later. The balcony of Ironwood Palace overlooked the entire valley. Spring had come, dissolving the snow, painting the world in shades of green so vivid they looked imagined. The stream was running again, its voice a constant musical murmur that Seraphine heard from every room in the east wing. She stood at the railing, holding a cup of tea, watching the sunrise. The kingdom had changed. She had changed it. The Omega Protection Act had been ratified by every pack on the continent within 3 months of its introduction. No more child labor in pack kitchens. No more medical suppression without consent. Mandatory screening for Wolf's Bane in all pack clinics. Training programs and education centers and legal protections for the wolves who had been invisible for too long. They called her the Breaker of Chains. She was also, somewhat to her amusement, the most feared Luna in recorded history. The story of the White Wolf had traveled fast. By the time the official accounts were published, the legend had grown to 3 times its actual size. She had supposedly killed 50 wolves with a single growl, leveled a mountain with her aura, and stared down the blood moon until it changed color. She had done none of those things. But she did not correct the stories. Let them grow. Let them become armor for the next Omega girl who was told she was nothing. Lysandra sent a letter from Northwatch 2 months after her exile. 3 sentences. The cold is unbearable. The silence is worse. You were right about the reflection. Seraphine did not reply, but she did not destroy the letter either. Brooding, she turned. Theron walked onto the balcony, shirtless, damp from his morning training run, muscles gleaming in the early light. He looked, as he always looked, like something carved from the mountain itself and then given a heartbeat as an afterthought. Reflecting, she corrected. He came up behind her, his arms wrapped around her waist, his chin settled on her shoulder. She leaned back into his warmth and felt the bond pulse between them, steady and deep and permanent. No trace of the curse, no shadow at the edges, just light. Do you regret it? He asked. The quiet life you lost? I never had a quiet life, Theron. I had a silent one. There is a difference. He was quiet for a moment. And now? She looked out at the valley, at the kingdom she was helping to reshape, at the mountains that had witnessed her rebirth and the sky that had turned red the night she broke a 300-year-old curse with nothing but the power of a wolf that should have been free all along. Now I am loud, she said. He laughed, low, warm, the kind of laugh that comes from a man who has spent 2 centuries forgetting how to be happy and is slowly, carefully, joyfully remembering. He reached into the pocket of his training pants and pulled out a small velvet box. I realized something, he said. She raised an eyebrow. I marked you. I claimed you. I bonded with you. I broke an ancient curse with you. He paused. But I never actually asked. He stepped back. He dropped to one knee. The Alpha King. On his knee. Again. Seraphine Hart, he said. He opened the box. Inside was not a diamond. It was a ring of woven moonstone and meteorite, black iron and white light, swirling together like the bond itself made solid. We are mates by fate, he said. But I want to be mates by choice. I do not want you because the goddess assigned you to me. I want you because you are fierce and stubborn and you argue with me about policy and you cannot cook to save your life and your singing voice is almost as bad as Elowen's and you are the only thing in this world that has ever made me feel like I am home. She was crying. She did not try to stop it. These were not the tears of the girl in the snow. These were the tears of a woman who had walked through fire and come out the other side holding the hand of the man who had walked through it beside her. Will you marry me? He asked, not as my queen, as my wife. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Alpha. He slid the ring onto her finger. He stood. He kissed her, deep and slow and thorough, as the sun broke over the mountains and bathed them both in gold. Far away, in a small gray pack house in Silver Creek, a former Beta heir was waking up alone. He would reach for his phone, as he did every morning, and open the news feed. He would see her face, Seraphine Hart Blackwood, the White Wolf Queen, smiling beside the Alpha King at a diplomatic summit, or opening a new training center for young wolves, or addressing the Continental Council with the kind of quiet authority that made elder wolves twice her age sit up straighter in their chairs. He would look at her face on the screen. He would remember the girl in the navy dress with the scuffed heels and the borrowed hairpins. He would remember the way she had looked at him in the ballroom with hope in her eyes. He would remember laughing. And the regret would settle into his chest like a stone, joining all the other stones that had accumulated over 6 months of watching the woman he had discarded become the most powerful Luna the world had ever seen. He would carry those stones for the rest of his life. Seraphine did not think about him. She had stopped thinking about him somewhere around the second month. He was not part of her story anymore. He was a footnote, a catalyst, the match that lit the fire but was consumed by it. She thought about other things now, about the Omega Girl in the Eastern Territories who had written her a letter saying, "I did not know I was allowed to want more until I heard about you." About the pack law she was drafting to ensure no child was ever medically suppressed again. About the nursery wing in Ironwood that she had not yet told Theron they would be needing. About the way the light changed on the mountains between autumn and winter. About the fact that Theron had been watching that light for 200 years and still found it surprising. About the privilege of standing beside him while he watched it, and the way he always turned from the view to look at her instead. "Why do you do that?" she asked him one evening, months from now, as they stood on the balcony watching the first snow of winter settle over the valley. "Do what?" "Look at me when the view is out there." He turned to her. Those violet eyes. That scar through his eyebrow. That face that was both ancient and ageless, brutal and tender. The face of a king who had learned, finally and permanently, what it meant to kneel. "Because I spent 100 years looking at the view," he said, "and I spent 6 months looking at you, and you are the first thing that has ever made the view jealous." She laughed. He kissed her. The snow fell around them like confetti at a celebration the universe was throwing for two wolves who had found each other against every possible odd. The beta had laughed while rejecting her. The alpha king had knelt. And Seraphine Hart Blackwood, the girl who scrubbed pots and swallowed poison and was told she was nothing, reigned. Not because someone gave her a crown, because she took it